your firewall, or making sure that you throw your antivirus up there and scan for different files. It's a number of things that all go into protecting the data that you want to protect. Security is built to make the business run more securely. It's not there to chokehold the business to where it doesn't is not able to run functionally. So different things we may implement while performing security throughout our day-to-day tasks may be risk assessment, maybe coming up with disaster recovery plans or security training for our employees. We may be checking audits and making sure that the configurations are put on those systems that need to be there. So it could be a number of things that we have in place, but it's not just technical. It's a more of a business standpoint than anything else, with some technology, technical aspects sprinkled in. Now, in your typical setting, you will have different roles that are in the security department. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to have a chief security officer, or sometimes they may go by a CISO, which is a chief informational security officer. 9 times out of 10, you'll have a manager or a technical manager that's right under them. And then you will have your analysts and your interns that's kind of doing your grunt work, so to say, in order to place those configurations in, building policies and so forth. Now it's the job of your analysts as well as anyone to actually do their due diligence and their due care when it comes to the business needs, and then what type of security we're going to actually provide the business when it comes to the operations that we're actually running in our business. Hey, before we move forward, I wanted to show you guys kind of like where you can look for some security roles and some positions that are hiring for informational security jobs. So I'm here on my LinkedIn page, and I'm going to go to jobs up here, and I'm going to just kind of scroll through to see what's going on. The one reason why I like looking on LinkedIn for jobs is that they actually take your profile and then kind of cater the job search towards your resume that you already have, right? So if you're already in the IT and you have that built up, then it makes it easier. But if you're not, let's say you're trying to break into IT, it's real easy to come up here and then cater to the search to be in that area. So I'm gonna just scroll down, and you're seeing, some security roles. You'll also have like this. These are all roles that you see in the security department team. All of them are just not analysts or managers. They could go under different names, where a compliance and operation manager will probably look over the policies and make sure that everybody's compliant, but also they might look at how we're actually doing operations to making sure that the operation, security operations, is actually helping out the business in day-to-day functions. Scrolling down here, I like this post right here. Informational Security Analyst 1 is out of Indian Land here in South Carolina, and I'm just going to click on that. And what I like to do is, you can read this here on LinkedIn, or if you're on Indeed, you can read it on their website. But what I would like to do is just kind of go out to the actual website here, and then read the application here and see what they want. Now they'll go through, and you got to keep in mind that when HR is building out these descriptions, sometimes they may hit what you actually are working on, and then sometimes they'll give you a high level overview of what you may be doing. But the one thing that I always go down and look for is the description. What would I do daily on a daily task? And then I will also go down to the requirements, the must-haves here, as they put it. But these are kind of the requirements that you need. So as a level 1 analyst, you'll need that 1 to 3 years of experience in IT. But we already discovered, and by saying that, informational security is not necessarily an IT field, it's more of a business function and then we understand how to apply security to the business functions. So keep that in mind. But it's centered, a lot of people think that it's centered around IT. So going down, you'll also see what type of things that make a top quality of a candidate, right? So they say that the security, plus certification would definitely put you as a standout. And it's always good to have, good to know about, you know, um, having the certification to back you on your resume. In some cases, your business may not be able to have a full department dedicated to just informational security. Sometimes you may have the third party that source out and make sure that you check in with them when it comes to the security aspect of your business. Whenever you're seeing more of a center that's dedicated to security, informational security, then it's 9 times out of 10 it's going to be called a SOC, Security Operations Center. You also have teams such as DevOps SOC, which is more like your developers who also implement security as well as the operations of the business, all developed into one, making it a whenever we're building applications, we're thinking with security in mind. And then you have a incident response team. This could be referred to as a CSIRT or some type of incident response team. If you take a look at this slide here, you'll see how the manager pieces, more like your CISOs and your security managers, they're sitting at the top of the pyramid. So you can imagine that more policy decisions, how the business is ran, and then how we're going to implement security around it is made at this level. And as it goes down the operational and the technical side of it, this is where you get your more managers and your analysts involved in actually pushing out the security configurations, policies out to the individuals and making sure that we are actually following those steps in order to become more secure. Now, when it comes to the actual operations of being attacked or putting things in place for an attack, we have function types. And here, explained here, we can see that we can either prevent, we can detect, or we can correct. And preventing is you're going to deal more with actually putting things in place to stop an attack, to mitigate an attack, or to just eliminate it all at once. Detective, we can actually just kind of sit back, see what's going on. We will go over that more in detail in further courses about what type of technology that actually is just sit back and why do we want to just sit back and learn from different tactics that attackers may be using. And then we have corrective. How do we actually, turn around the actual action that has been taken upon us? And we also want to know what happens, what we need to do after an attack. If we're actually hit, okay, how do we recover from that? So to continue on that, security controls that we can also put in can be physical, and we can have deterrence, and we can have a compensating control. So a physical control will be more like your security locks, You can have fences put up. We can have security guards with a actual TV at their desk so they can monitor everything. Those are examples of physical controls we can always put into place. We can have deterrents, things like signs such as, stay away or beware of electrical shock or something like that. Something that we can put up and we can make noticeable to anybody who would want to cross the line, come into the premises where they're not supposed to be. We can deter and actually discourage them from going through with their actions, right? And then we have a compensating control. Say we would just accept the risk that happens, and we're just gonna say, hey, we can't stop the typhoon from coming in, but so what we'll do is we'll make sure we have insurance and we can recover from that if we're actually hit by the natural disaster. It's always important to understand what type of business and industry you're in, just to know what kind of framework that you might want to use when it comes to implementing information security into your business. So you want to use these frameworks because they're good foundations to actually follow and to make sure that you're compliant if you're doing any type of business. When I say that, I kind of bring up the example of just using credit cards. If your company is collecting credit card data because you're actually doing transactions of sales or e-commerce, then you might want to make sure that you have the right framework in place in order to stay compliant and making sure that you're not breaking any laws. So a good framework that you can actually get into is looking at what we have in NIST or seeing what other cybersecurity frameworks that we have out there. Sometimes finding a international organization of standardization can help you bring those frameworks into play and actually see more in depth on the type of security that you need to apply for your business. So a good example of that is the Cloud Security Alliance. They have a good certification with the CCSK that can help informational security professionals understand how we're putting data into the cloud and how to keep that data secure in the cloud. So they can provide you with cloud matrix and cloud control matrix, where it kind of gives you this layout of things to look for, questions to ask your provider before you actually just give them data. So it's good to look these organizations up, see what kind of standards that they have out there, and then apply them on your day-to-day basis when it comes to security. Having a good benchmark is showing that you have done your due diligence when it comes to seeing how your business operates and then how we're going to actually apply security to it. Having said that, we can use something such as the Open Web Application Security Projects, OWAPs, to apply the configurations that we need when it comes to web browsing and making sure that we stay secure when our clients are out there browsing the web. So that takes us to regulations and standards. So having those regulations and standards put in place, again, is showing that you have due diligence. You've done your due diligence. You actually taking that step forward in order to protect the data that's in your business, protect the operations that we're actually doing. A good example of this is applying things such as your SOX, the FISMA Act, making sure that we're in compliance with GLBA, HIPAA, as well as PCI DSS. Now, all of those standards are in different fields, but we need to make sure we understand what type of industry that we're in, and then if we fall under these different types of standards, regulations. Because if we break out of the standards that are there, then it's a good chance that we could be held accountable in a court of law. So as a key point to remember, starting informational security, we started talking about the CIA triad and how, we're going to use those three different pillars in order to secure our data or make it available or making sure that it doesn't change by any means. We also talked about the different types of roles that we have in our business. When it comes to informational security, who's sitting at the top with the CISO, and then we have security managers that's pushing out to our analysts of the configurations and the regulations that we need to abide by. We also talked about the different standards and the different regulations that we need to also abide by when it comes to making data secure, but also making sure that we're in standards and in compliance of the legal laws that's been placed on our business and our industry. So let's jump into lesson 2, threat actors, and then actually gaining some threat intelligence. This is where we're gonna, go a little bit deeper into who is exactly attacking or sitting on our network, and then what kind of intelligence can we actually gain to protect ourselves against these type of attacks that they're gonna put on us. So before we get into threat actors and intelligence, let's understand what is a risk. Risk is having a vulnerability and a threat present pretty much at the same time. If they're present at the same time, then the likelihood of the risk actually happening is very high. If they're not, let's say if they're not in the same vicinity at that point in time, the risk level will be low. A good example would be if you're in Idaho and you have a building that's made out of straw, then the risk factor of having a hurricane come and hit your straw-made house is low, right? But the risk factor for it getting hit by a tornado is high. So the vulnerability will be the fact that the straw house can be exploited. It can be broken into very easily by high winds, right? So, but the threat of certain actors, in this case, will be in the hurricane. The hurricane is not going to make it to the middle of the United States. So therefore, it's low when it comes to a hurricane, but yet high because tornadoes are common in Idaho, right? So we just want to make sure that we understand that whenever a vulnerability is there for, let's say, a server, for a different example, and then a threat, a hacker is out there and is snooping around the network, the probability of the risk, the probability or the likelihood of being hacked, that risk is very high. All right, so we want to make sure that whenever we're taking a test or we see anything when it comes to informational security, if you have any two of these equations, then it will lead to the impact of the risk. And if you remove any one of these factors, if you remove a vulnerability or you remove the threat, then it pretty much eliminates the risk. Okay. Attributes of a threat actor, it could be a number of things why a threat actor would choose your business, your data to be a potential target. It could be they just simply don't like what you stand for, what you bring to the table. It could be the simple fact that you just left configurations open, and they're, let's say, sharpening their skills for a bigger job. So it can vary on a scale from you're very popular to I need to work on something, so I'm gonna work on someone that's not as big on the net. So you fall into that area. It could be I have a target audience. I'm going for anybody who is a baby boomer. I'm going for that older audience. It could be I work for a competitor and I'm wanting to, drive traffic over to my product versus my competitors. It could be I'm an internal person that turn rogue, and now I'm going to expose the company for the truth that needs to be shown to the public. So it can be a number of things on why threat actors are actually in it to actually pose a threat to your data. So with that being said, let's go into hackers, script kiddies, and hacktivists. So let's start off with script kiddies, just because they're kind of, to me, they're the forefront. This is where people kind of start off, where they are not, they're not so great in hacking, or their hacking skills haven't gotten up to par yet. So they will go out there and pay for an actual disruption, a executable that they can plant into a server or some type of PC or any device for that matter, and create a DDoS attack on that device. So these are kind of plug and play type hackers, right? So they're getting things that's already pre-made. They have no idea what is it doing, or how is it made. They just know that it works whenever they double click, right? So that's your script kiddies. Your lone hacker is going to be someone that's more seasoned, maybe having their own agenda, being able to actually be employed by somebody, and being able to keep a white hat, so to say, during the daytime, and a black hat during the night. And that's kind of a cliche analogy, but when it comes to wearing different types of hats, you have a white hat where I'm strictly doing things by the book. I'm not going rogue and looking at things for my own personal gain. And then I have a black hat where everything that I'm doing is against the law, and I'm doing things for my own personal gain, or I'm doing things because I'm hired to do so, right? And then you have that gray hat where I think a lone hacker will probably hang out at the most, right? So they could be employed by someone, but look at the misconfigurations of different types of devices within an organization, and maybe put that black hat on just to kind of make some money on the side, or prove a point. You never know. So again, going back to the attributes of why are these people doing this type of stuff, it can vary from threat to threat, right? And then you have your hacktivists, your hacker teams. These are people that are probably going to get into a political sector, and they're actually going to do some social engineering to make massive moves to steer individuals in a direction that they want them to go. The most recent one that I remember is probably the 2016 elections, where we had a slew of people claim that the votes were swayed into a certain way. And so hacktivists were behind that type of movement, and then it caused to really shape and shift the world in a when you look at the whole grand scheme of things. So to kind of stay on the hacktivist standpoint, and kind of moving into APTs, APTs are probably the most I would say seasoned threats out there. They're probably sitting on your network for years at a time, and they're just there to collect that data, right? So a lot of times you'll see these highly sophisticated hackers not even being discovered in most networks. Most businesses do not realize that they actually have someone there already collecting data. A lot of these groups are state backed, so they're actually state actors. You'll hear a lot of terms correlate with that, where they're actually paid by an organization to collect data, right? And do that data mining, and figure out what's the data flow when it comes to what's going in, what's going out, what things are you planning to do with your business. And these APTs are just sitting there watching the whole thing. I heard cases where they'll sit there for 6-7 years before they actually are found out, and then um, you have to, escalate things immediately, and then put out public statements saying that, it's believed that we've been breached, 5 years ago, and we're just now coming up with that today. So keep an eye out for advanced persistent threats. Those are, you're pretty much your advanced hackers that are just sitting there collecting data. I kind of touched on the insider threat actor a little bit, but this is just pretty much, an employee of the organization that decided to go rogue, decided, for whatever reason, that the private sector of the company needs to be public, right? Whatever they have access to, they decided to either, bring it out to the public's viewing, or maybe sell it on the dark web, whatever they decide to do, because, and they don't have a necessarily reason why. Well, I can't say that. They don't have it's no particular reason on why you would create an insider threat, but it does happen, and it could be from a various reasons of, they may not like the way someone talked to them at work, and then now, since they have access to the whole payroll, then they decided to show that, uh, this is the payroll for 2022, and they're gonna make this public, and now that creates this type of buzz around the company, right? So this is your insider threat. It's always important to have policies in place whenever we bring someone on and we actually offboard someone. Let's say if someone quits abruptly, that may be a telltale sign that they could be an insider threat, a malicious insider. So we need to put things in place in our policies to make sure that we take assets away immediately, making sure that we keep things on hand so many years after that person hasn't left the building. So just keep that in mind when it comes to insider threats. So let's talk now. Let's talk about the attack surface, or the vectors that hackers are using to get into our network. Um, think of our network as a kind of like an invisible wall that we have around our data, our important data, right? So I'm not talking like a physical wall, like the brick and mortar building that you actually go into, but the visible wall that you don't see, that's protecting our data. So it's by firewalls, or putting out there on a DMZ, things of that nature. But it's ways to actually go in and then come out, right? So when you go into your office and you log in, and then when you leave out to go to when you leave out and go to the internet, that's leaving out, right? You're leaving outside of the safe confines of your network to either bring in information from, let's say, Google Drive, or we're going to post something on social media. So that's information leaving out. I'm going to post something, or I'm bringing something in. I went and downloaded it, and now I'm bringing it into my invisible fence, and now it's in my network, right? So that's what I want you guys to think about when it comes to attack surface. What is the ways into your actual network? And then how are we getting in? What are the vectors that we're using to get in? Is it direct access? Can I just walk into your building, sit down at your desk, and you don't even have no login screen or anything like that? You're at lunch, right? So can I log in and just go to work and start seeing what's there and what's not there, right? What do you have saved on your desktop? What's in your documents folder? Can I just plug in my USB stick and pull that off? Can I send you an email? I think by far the most popular way of doing it is just kind of sending a fish email. Why not? You see it every day. You get it every day in your spam email. So it's obviously it's working, because people are constantly doing it, right? They're constantly sending it out. Can I just talk to you on social media? Have you posted something on social media that you shouldn't? You know, these are certain ways that you could gain information about a company just by reading, what people are actually posting on social media. I talked about the cloud earlier with G Drive or Google Drive, where that's considered the cloud, right? And I can go out there on any device because the cloud is pretty much everywhere. I don't necessarily have to be in your building. I can take it from there. Um, so there's many different vectors, and that's knowing these things is a good way of saying um, having an understanding of how data flows in and flows out. So we went over, attack vectors. We went over, who could be possibly doing the attacking, and then now let's find out how can we arm ourselves, right? And I think the best way to arm ourselves is with knowledge and being able to research how are they actually doing attacks in the wild in real time, right? And this is when we are wanting to get that type of intelligence on our threats. So we can arm ourselves better by saying, okay, let's put these things in play because this is what they're doing. If we're protecting ourselves and they're not even doing that anymore, um, is it is it, are we wasting time and money by focusing in places where we shouldn't be? So one way we can do this is we can put things such as a honeypot out there for individual to go in and attack. And when they're participating in this attack, we can sit back and monitor how they actually are doing their attacks. And then we can record all of that stuff down, and then we can have our smart guys at our application department write our application to be aware of the attacks and then put things into um, actually defend against those attacks, right? So that's why we would have something that's sitting out there that looks vulnerable from the get-go. So it may be a server. Let's say we put a server out there in the DMZ. This is kind of like a no man's land where we can see it, but they can actually get to it as well. So we put a server out there and we name it payroll server. Do not enter, right? And of course, that's obvious and it looks like the obvious thing, but I'm just giving an example. Someone logs into it and they go to, performing their ritual of how to figure out what's open, what's not. They're running their tools on this thing, and only thing we're doing is we're sitting back recording all of the data that they're doing, right? So it's kind of like, just if you remember a show called Bait Car, where they just kind of left the car unlocked, and the robber will come in and they'll drive off a couple of feet, and then the cops will jump out and arrest them. It's kind of that same concept, right? We're putting something out there, we're realizing how are they actually just attacking, and then we make the countermeasure to that. Another place where we can get good information is from the vendors that we have in our network, right? So all the devices that we have or the software that we're using in our environment, why not go to their website to see what type of technology that they have in place, what type of updates are they pushing out to see how they're actually combating against the attacks that are heading out there. It's real good to see, especially when new attacks come out there that are very fresh. The latest one that I've seen was Log J4, and we had to pretty much go to every vendor that we had, every device that we had, and see at the vendor's website, were the configurations or the software that we use for that particular device, was it vulnerable to log J4? And we had to update those things constantly in order to figure out if we were what type of vector was a new vector for us. You understand? So where we did not have a vector into our environment, it created a whole new with this vulnerability. A vulnerability showed up. It just so happened that A lot of software uses Log4j, and a lot of our devices became vulnerable just like that, out of the blue. And so it's always a good thing to go to these vendors' website, stay up to date to see what they're talking about, and see if you're actually see how they're actually fighting against things in the wild. We already talked about tactics, techniques, and the procedures the way when we were explaining the honeypot example, where we would watch to see what they're actually doing in the wild. And then when we're doing our research, we're also understanding how attacks are actually being, performed, right? But we also want to make sure that we understand what are the indicators of a compromise. How do we know that we have been compromised, or it may be a good indication that we are probably compromised. So you want to look for, unusual outbound traffic, things that are going out in a mass amount of traffic leaving the network. You want to also be aware if you have traffic coming in from areas that you should be blocking. So a lot of traffic from China, a lot of traffic from, let's say, Germany, um, well, let's say South America. If you have a lot of traffic that's coming in from these areas and you normally don't have that, then it's a good indication that something may be up. Um, is there any kind of explanation to uh, user accounts being used for the wrong things? Um, can you see any type of misuse of privilege accounts, right? So those are privilege accounts, or those are accounts that have admin access, maybe to throughout the network, or maybe to certain particular PCs that have uh, great value to them. Do you see any kind of unusual activity to those type of user accounts? Um, is there a type of, any type of rise in databases being read at a high volume? If there's only a particular threshold that we have for reading data on our databases, and then all of a sudden it spikes through the roof. What's the cause of that? That might be cause to raise some questions there. Um, we also see kind of like a high request for important files, sensitive files, confidential files. When you start seeing people who shouldn't be snooping around, who are snooping around, these are good indications. So it's a good way of having these type of indicators in place, and being aware of them is a good indication to it's a good way to understand if you've been breached and if changes need to be made. But don't worry, you don't have to necessarily put your face in literature all day and read upon how things are actually being worked on here in the wild. It's good to do those things on a daily basis, but we can also have machine learning out here that understands the daily workflow of our business, and can tell you, can alert, and some can even mitigate if things go awry, right? So if anything was to be abnormal to the normal workday, machine learning or artificial intelligence would be able to detect and then warn us to say, hey, this doesn't look right. It's a lot of traffic leaving out, or a lot of traffic coming in. We're being bombarded here. So it's always good to have these tools in place and making sure that they're configured right to help us stay secure overall. So in summary, we went over threat actors, we went over the vectors that they can come in, we went over how can we do some research in order to better arm ourselves against the attacks that they may be placing upon us. So I would definitely go back over and make sure that we dive deeper into the type of procedures that we want to have, the type of due diligence that we need to do within our company to make sure that we apply the due care in order to avoid attacks from insider threats or people who may be APTs that's sitting in our system, right? And so making sure that we stay knowledgeable about how they're performing their attacks will help us in the long run when we see things go astray. So in lesson 3, we're going to start talking about performing security assessments. So as a security professional, sometimes we take network tools and actually see how traffic is moving from point to point on our network as well as outside of our network. And we need to be aware of the type of tools that we use in this types of scenarios, and then how can we use them to our advantage, and then also how can an attacker use it for their advantages as well. So the first thing we want to get into is opening up our command prompt and then typing in an ipconfig command to see what type of IP address that we get. And this is I want you guys to think about an IP address as kind of like your home address, right? So in order for you to receive mail in the physical world, the post office will give you a postal address, right? And in order for someone in New Jersey to send you a letter, they need to have that address, and then it goes from post office to post office until it's able to go down your lane, your driveway, or what have you, and then into your mailbox. Well, the IP address is similar to that, right? Where your router is sort of like a post office, and it will assign your devices an address. This in case it'll be a IP address, and it uses that IP address in order to communicate to other devices within the world, whatever it may be, from a server to gaming consoles to your smart refrigerator that tells you how many degrees your milk is chilling at, right? So we can use an IP address to identify each other on the network, or in this case, the internet, right? So we can also use things kind of like a what's called a ping. So we can open up our command prompt, and I'll show you guys in a second. We'll open up our command prompt and we'll ping another address or a domain name, and it can return to us their address. So let's say if we wanted to know the IP address to the server for ESPN.com. And what we'll do is we'll ping ESPN.com. It'll show us the information there. So I'll show you guys that in just a second. To go back to our analogy of, how you actually have a physical address within the real world, and the post office will give you an address to receive and to actually deliver mail. The same thing in the computer world. We can route different ways of getting to different destinations, and in your computer it keeps this things and call what we call a routing table, and we have all the different IP addresses that we are familiar with, and then new ones that we verify and we understand that this is who they say they are. We put them in that routing table. We can also use our command prompt to show us trace routes, and that's kind of like what I was saying before of just showing the logical hops that a packet takes from your PC all the way to a receiving server or gaming station or what have you. So again, I'll show you all those things in just a second. Now, as security professionals, you will run across these things called a IP scanner or Nmap. What they do is they actually scan your network. You'll sometimes hear the terminology crawl the network. And what they do is they actually kind of do like a ping test or a more in-depth conversation to whatever device that's on that network, and it pulls information from it. So it will say, hey, I crawled the network and I see that there's 10 actual phones on your network, cell phones, and 5 of them are Android, and then the other 5 were iPhones. And then it can even get more granular by saying, hey, I found a PC on your network. This is the operating system that is running, and these are the ports, the communicating ports that are open to this PC. It's very important to understand that we can use this as a administrative tool, right? We can make sure that we know what's on the network. We can know how we're communicating in and out the data flow, correct? But also the bad guys can take this and actually do reconnaissance on your network, so they can actually not necessarily attack you that day, but if I want to get information about you and make sure that, hey, all right, I'm messing with Macs today because this is a Mac shop. This is a Mac place of business. They only run Macs in there and iPhones, iOS, right? So I need to make sure that I get the attacks, my playbooks ready for Macs, right? Whatever vulnerabilities that may be out for Mac. So this can be a good tool, but also it can be used for bad things as well. So like I alluded to earlier, these type of in-map scanners can also do kind of a service discovery. So again, showing what type of ports you have open or what type of services that you're using to communicate to other devices on. It can build a fingerprint of how your network is set up, right? And this again is it's good for an administrative point of view, from a high level to see all of your blueprint or your fingerprint of the network, what we call a footprint, right? We can see the footprint of the network and see how data is coming in and out. But at the same time, it's also bad if we someone else knows about that footprint, because the things that we're focusing on today or this week may not be the things that your hacker or your attacker is actually focusing on. So it's kind of, you need to understand when you see traffic spike up, or services kind of degrade down, or they bog out, because when someone's running these type of scans, it can cause printers to actually accidentally just print out gibberish or random sheets of paper, or it could cause different types of PCs to slow down tremendously to the network, right? Because it's actually pinging, seeing that it's up, pulling the information, communicating with it, and that is what we call very noisy, right? So whenever we see a lot of noise on the network, we need to be aware of that, and then do what's necessarily possible to find it and shut that communication off. Another way we can find out different types of PCs that's out there on the network, we can also do a netstat command, and that's showing everything that we have a connection to. And you can pull this command up, and you'll actually see how your PC is actually communicating out to different services, different applications. More importantly, NS lookups is a very important thing as a security professional, because we get to understand. It's kind of hard to look at numbers all day and IP addresses and IPv6 addresses and kind of disseminate what's what, right? But these NS lookups allow us to use those DNS references. DNS stands for domain name service, and it allows us to use that type of service to say it's google.com, and then we can get an IP address of saying that it's 8.8.8.8. I think that's too many eights, but you get my drift, right? So we can use a English version or whatever language you may speak into translating it into an IP address version, so we can actually break things down to see exactly where things are going. Similar to a in-mapping tool is your packet captures. So those type of tools sniff the network, and they actually capture all the packets that's going from one destination to another. The one that you'll probably see the most will be Wireshark, and Wireshark sniffs the network, and it pulls down all the packets that you're sending from your PC out to your router. out to your, if you're saying hello to your smart TV, it captures all of that stuff that's on your particular network. And that's why it's so important to, we can use this as a administrative tool and say, okay, we're having network issues here. Let's get the packet sniffer out. Let's see what's actually going on in the network. But we can also use it for bad cases, right? Where someone that is not in your organization can go and take Wireshark to sniff your network to see who is communicating, what IP addresses are being going back and forth, what's the routes we're taking, and it can be used in that field as well. So here's a screenshot of Wireshark in action. Now, in the following slide, I'll show you exactly. I'll give you a screen recording of how we actually go out there and download Wireshark and actually pull some packets off my network. But basically, this is how it goes. It captures all of these packets in real time, and we could take these packets and we can see exactly how they're communicating, and then who they're communicating with. And then in some cases, we can go into the packet and see if they actually have any type of payload within those packets. So it's a good tool to have to do reconnaissance in, but it's also a good tool to have to understand how we can build our network to be as efficient as possible. Now let's stay in that realm of packets moving back and forth, right? So these packets are literally the actual letters, right? When going back to our analogy of having a physical mailbox and then the post office putting mail into your mailbox, right? The mail going into your mailbox are the packets in the computer world, right? So we want to say these packets going back and forth, they are enclosed within an envelope, right? And then within the envelope, we have the actual data that's going back and forth, and it needs to go to the right source, correct? So whenever we have someone tampering with our packets, they can inject things that they want to be in there, and then now we're getting outside activities thinking that we're communicating correctly, and we're being redirected in a certain type of way. So we're getting mail that we are not accounting for, and that's because people can get onto our network and be able to inject types of malicious, let's say, data in order for us to pass back and forth, right? Or to redirect us into a malicious site. So it's very important to understand how replay attacks work, as well as packet injections, to making sure that we are aware and that our users are aware that whenever we see any kind of weird activity on the network, that we're able to react to it in a timely manner. So let's talk about some software that we can actually use to exploit normal activity, getting on to the network and being able to inject some packets or be able to brute force some passwords. The main one that we want to focus in on is Metasploit. Metasploit is a known vulnerability software that can see the vulnerabilities and as well as be able to attack them. They can interject with malicious payloads, and is what a lot of attackers will use to actually break in and perform some of these attacks. So Netcat is a utility feature that we can use to where we can transfer files on the back end and not be discovered from the client's point of view. So it's a good utility to use when administering, but it's also can be a useful utility for a hacker as well. They can also perform port scanning and fingerprinting of that system, as well as they can use it to connect across UDP and TCP connections. A lot of times we see that the problem with vulnerabilities is that they live in a software world, right? Right. So it's your application that's the problem. It's the actual OS, the operating system, that's the problem, or it's your firmware. They may be um, needing updates because they have a vulnerability that need to be met, or it needs to be mitigated in order for you to really kind of work on it securely. So it's very important for us to understand how to update the applications that we have on our network. It's very important to understand that if we have operating systems out there, will the manufacturer actually give you patches for it? And when I say patches, patches are built to bring in security measures for the vulnerabilities that's out there. So it's patching the holes, so to say, right? So will that vendor have that patch ready for you to actually apply to the software that you're actually working on? Um, a lot of firmware that's out there, it goes unnoticed because a lot of times once we boot up a system, we jump past the firmware issues and we go straight into our operating system. And a lot of times an attacker may go and attack the part that we overlooked, that firmware. So we need to make sure that we are up to date on all of our applications, operating systems, and firmware. We also, when it goes back to operating systems, we want to make sure that it's actually up to date and is supported by that vendor. And I would say that'll go for everything, as far as applications as well too. It's a lot of times we may come across a software or an application, and the vendor, the people who actually created it, they're not in business anymore. So how do we go about communicating safely if there's no one doing any research on the back end to let us know that it's vulnerable? So just some things to keep in mind when going out there and looking at different applications, OSs, and such. Just to kind of continue on with that conversation of having software that's out of date. You don't want necessarily a legacy software that's out there and people are just kind of using it because it's worked for so long. Why should we change it? And a good example would be someone operating on Windows XP or Windows 7, Windows 8. And it's just like, hey, we set it up, but there's no problem. We don't have any problems with it. So why should we change it? Well, those are legacy operating systems and they don't receive any patches anymore. So if there's any kind of 0-day vulnerability to it, then they won't have any type of patch to come out and help you out with that. So it's a known vulnerability, and now it's a matter of time before someone can actually exploit that vulnerability. So a 0-day is whenever it's a vulnerability that's is very fresh, right? No one knows of it. It's kind of like the first day that it was actually discovered, and now there's a rush to actually find a remedy for it or for the attacker side to actually exploit it. Because if I just heard about a 0-day that just happened, well, there's no patches out there to stop me. So if I can get to each and every device as quick as possible to exploit it, I don't have to worry about the patch management stopping my plans. On the flip side, if I was a good guy and I heard about a 0-day, I want to make sure that my vendor or whoever the application is with or operating system is with is that they have a patch that came out and I'm able to apply that patch as soon as possible. So being able to stay upon, going out, doing your research, making sure that you're staying up on the news to see what type of 0-days that come out, and making sure that you apply your patches. Microsoft comes out with patches pretty much the first Tuesday of every month. And so we want to apply those patches. Now we can go into more granular schemes of putting it in a test field, testing it out, see if it breaks anything, then applying the patch. But for the most part, you want to make sure that you understand patches do come out and they're for that security reason, right? And we just need to stay up on those. We want to avoid weak configurations, right? Whenever we add a new device to our system or our network, sometimes we could it's easy just to place the new extender router here, and whatever configuration comes on it, hey, if it works, fine, I don't care, long as it works. But having, those accounts, you sometimes different devices come with default accounts, and sometimes that information of how to log into those default accounts are public, so we can Google those type of what's the admin username and password for a particular router that you have. And so if that information is public and you never change your default account password or account, then it's easy for someone to Google that information, get onto your network, and then go into your devices. So we want to make sure that we have a plan in place to actually change those type of configurations. We want to make sure that we change the passwords to default accounts. Make sure that we configure the settings of whatever device to tailor our business needs, right? And we want to make sure that it doesn't have an overwhelming amount of permissions to do whatever it wants to do on the network. So a good example of that is why not take away everything that it can do and only give it the permission that what it needs to do, right? That way, if someone does get into a router or whatever device that's on your network, it doesn't give them the right to actually go out there and perform some of these things that just need permission in order to execute, right? So let's go a little bit deeper into that. Not only just having default passwords and accounts there, but going into that configuration piece, we want to make sure that we shut down. When I said, in that previous slide to take away things that it can do and only give it the things that it needs to do, we want to shut down different services, different ports that it doesn't need to work on. If we're not going to be doing any type of file transfer, why should I have FTP open? Right. So if it doesn't need to do that, then we need to shut those things down. Different protocols, the way it communicates to other devices. If we have a working knowledge of how we want our devices to work, then we can configure them to actually be more secure by being less, I guess, verbose as far as the things that it can do on the network. Also, setting up different encryption levels when it comes to our passwords, and this is more on the networking side. So if you have like a home router, making sure that we don't use weak passwords and weak encryptions on those passwords to make it easier for one to break in, right? Making sure that we have a standard there. Um, these are different configurations that help us operate in a more secure manner. Now, we have those weak configurations and default passwords still in play, then we run a high risk of letting vulnerabilities be exploited. And these can lead to data breaches. So we all know, or we all have heard of data breaches and how companies have fall victim to these type of attacks, but it's pretty much where confidential data is being transferred without someone's authorization. So that could be malicious, but it also could be, a mistake on someone as well. So you have different aspects of data breaches as far as how data goes in and goes out, but that's why it's important for us to know how it's actually going out and making sure that we put constraints on those things, so it's not happening so easily, right? But also with that, we can also have identity thefts. So we all heard how Experian has fall victim of a data breach where millions of people's personal identity, have been leaked out to the dark web. Also, these data breaches, not only do they have, impacts on people's actual data, but it also has kind of like a impact on a company's reputation. Um, how many of you would still go to Nike and buy shoes from their website when they just released that they had a massive data leakage of people's credit card numbers. And it will damage their reputation as being a secure, responsible company for letting that type of information out. So it's something that we want to stay away from as much as possible, because it can have not only a physical damage to it, but it also can have that intangible, something that we can't touch, something that we more feel about a reputation of a company. So how can third parties play a hand in this? Think about all the third party vendors that you may have in your company. You may work for Wells Fargo, but they may use Adobe Acrobat. Well, Adobe Acrobat is your third party, and Adobe, I'm sorry, not the Acrobat is the actual product that they sell, but Adobe is their third party vendor. And if Adobe is under attack, then you need to make sure that the software that you're using is not a part of that, or what can we do to remediate that vulnerability that may be plaguing your network, because you're um, in a way letting them in because you have decided to use this vendor for whatever service, but now they may be under attack in some type of way. To give another example is if they have, if let's say Box.com, where it's a online a cloud storage service, if they have personal information of your customers because you're using them to store information on there, and then they have a leakage of your customers, then in turn your reputation is damaged because you chose to go with that company. So it's very important to do research on who you decide to let come into your network, who you're giving your data to, where is that data actually lying at on your third party's software. So let's say go back into Acrobat, not Acrobat, I'm sorry, Google, or let's say Box.com. You can also do Google Drive, but let's say once we transfer data from our network to Google Drive or Box.com, where is it actually sitting at on their servers? Is their servers in Argentina? Is it in Spain? Is it in Africa? Do we have policies? Are we allowed to have our customers' data in those countries? So there's just different things that we need to think about when actually bringing in third parties, and then what risk do they actually put on us indirectly. So we're going to start talking about security assessment frameworks, and a good place to start is with the NIST SP 800-115, and this is going to give you a bunch of guidelines, procedures, policies to actually take in and apply to your business for whatever reason that you may need it. And it'll give you a good overview of how to get started when it comes to vulnerability assessments, threat hunting, and penetration testing. Now, to break those three things down, vulnerability assessment is just kind of doing a risk management, right? Where we see what type of risks that are out there, um, what kind of vulnerabilities do we hold in our network against those type of risks, and then what are we going to do to actually manage those risks, or are we going to try to eliminate, mitigate, avoid different aspects like that. So that's vulnerability assessments. Threat hunting is more getting down to we know the threat, we know the risk that holds to that threat and that vulnerability, and so we're going after the elimination of that threat, or we're going to do some reconnaissance on that threat as well. With penetration testing, we're talking about having a outside vendor or maybe someone who is dedicated on your team to actually probing the network, probing the policies, the things that we have in place, our security framework that we already have in place that's up and running. We're looking to attack that, seeing how to find any kind of faults within our security posture already. So that's penetration testing. So going into vulnerability scanners, we have these things in place in order to scan our network and see what type of devices we have on there, as well as the applications that they're running. And it double checks that application and that OS against a database of vulnerabilities and risks that are out there. And once it gives us a report of how the scan went, we are able to either remediate or to kind of get a better understanding of what type of risk that we are, um, what kind of risks are we up against on a device to device standpoint. And we can also use this type of scanner for OS fingerprinting, as well as seeing what type of firmware vulnerabilities that we may have. Now, when you're having your vulnerability scanner scan the network and it applies those vulnerabilities to the database and it comes back with a report, it will give you a scale on if it's a low risk or a critical risk, right? It's a scale from low to high, and you normally see these things called CVEs, and that's the common vulnerability exposure, and that's kind of the name of the vulnerability that's out there. And then the scoring system will be under the CVSS, which is a common vulnerability scoring system, um, and you'll normally see it as a scale from 1 to 0. I'm sorry, a scale from 1 to 9, and the lower you are to 1, the more likely you could probably let that vulnerability slide. But the more you're getting up to your 7, 8s, and 9s, then you probably want to make sure that you seek the patch or whatever remediation that they will advise, and then apply it as soon as possible. Now, in some cases, you may want to test this patch out or test the remediation out first before you apply it within a production field or what have you. But to make sure that you don't just put every patch out there, and that's in certain cases. I would advise to always test your patches before you actually apply. When running vulnerability scans, we can have certain things that can cause a lot of problems. Uh, and sometimes we can have those scans that where they run smoothly, and these are where you hear the terms intrusive and non-intrusive come into play. So a non-intrusive scan will run fairly smooth. You have credentials, you have permissions to actually run on the network on those endpoint devices, and this is a lot of times where you'll see an endpoint actually sitting on the device itself. So you'll kind of look into your lower right hand corner of your, let's say, Windows PC, and you'll see an icon there that's kind of different, and it may be the icon from the vulnerability scanner that you're running on your network. So there it has the permission to go ahead and scan whatever's there on that box, right? So where a intrusive scan will come from a outsource, it will seem as an outsource source, right? And it's a it's going to be loud and create havoc because it's not supposed to be there, and this can interfere with business processes and slow down the actual scanning process, but it also can slow down the production of a workday. So we want to make sure that we understand what type of scans we're going to do. We're just not going to go and get a vulnerability scanner for our network and then go to scanning, right? We want to test these things out, see how loud it is, how intrusive it is, and then tone it down to where we're able to scan, see our vulnerabilities, but at the same time be productive throughout the workday and work week. So when running vulnerability scans on your network, you have a option of having a credential or non-credential scan. So that means where we can preload those administrative passwords into certain folders or certain documents or applications that's on the network. So whenever the vulnerability is scanning, it doesn't check that part. It has the permission to go ahead and get past the login portion and then scan that folder, which can create a more smoother scan for you and be less intrusive. But it doesn't give you a hacker's point of view, right? So if you have things in place to where that person needs to brute force and a password on that folder or what have you, then it's a lot more louder whenever they're running that brute force type of attack on your network. So therefore, you can have other things come in and swoop in and cancel out that action if necessary. So just kind of things to keep in mind whenever running those type of scans. You want to make it as real as possible, but at the same time keep the business in mind to where if running those type of scans is noisy and it creates issues throughout the business day, you might want to go ahead and make it a credential type of scan to make it less intrusive and make it smooth for the business operations. Now, I did wanted to come and say that the vulnerability scanners are not perfect by no means. Um, they do, from a time to time, have false positives and then false negatives. Of course, we don't want to have false negatives, but we rather tone down the false positives and have no false negatives. So a false positive is that it's something that we are aware of, or it's not a actual problem, but the machine, the system alerts on it, right? Well, false negative is something that is a problem, but the machine doesn't alert on it. So again, far worse than a false positive, even though in some cases you may have a machine that flags a whole bunch of stuff to be a false positive, where that may be annoying. It's still not as dangerous as having a false negative where you know you don't even know if there's a problem there because it didn't see it as a problem. And so when we put our trust into that type of scan, um, making sure that you have little to no false negatives is very important. So let's go a little deeper into penetration testing, pen test for short, also known as ethical hacking. And that's where you're testing your security posture, like I said, to see what's already there and then actually putting pressure against it, seeing if the configurations are uh, doing their job, right? It's the actual appliance that we put in place. Is it actually blocking anything? Um, are the credentials that we put here since we changed it, is it vulnerable to being brute forced, things of that nature. And a lot of times we have third party vendors come in and strike a contract with a company and then actually perform a pen test, um, to give them to give the company a better understanding of how the security posture is. So if I have a third party vendor come in and they could take the position of a outsider, a hacker, right? And be able, if they can go from having nothing to actually being on the network, then they can give us a report after the whole test is over, and then we can go back and say, hey, we need to address these different problems because he was just a normal guy on the street, and now he was on our network looking at all our folders and different type of data that we wanted to keep concealed. So pen testing is a very important part. I would say it needs to happen about at least once a year annually, and it's always since your network, your business is constantly changing. Pen tests are needed on an annual basis in order to shift and form that security posture with it. So staying with the example of a third party coming in, um, and they strike that contract up to say, hey, I'm going to do a pen test for you. They need to set the ground rules of how do we actually engage each other, right? So the rules of engagement may go from the time that they start to what devices and let's say servers you can't touch. Will you give them full access? Will you give them credentials to be on the network? Are you going to say, hey, start from the parking lot and work your way in the best way you can? And when I give hard examples like that, when I give the person nothing to work with and actually have them try to get onto the network, that's from a black box standpoint. And when I give them, let's say if we bring someone in and then we give them a credential, we give them a username and password, and we just say, hey, you can only stay within this domain, and these are the folders you can only mess with, then I'm giving you more of a white box type of um, gateway into our network. And then a gray box is where I give you some information. Hey, this is our Wi-Fi name, but I don't give you a password. This is our These are our employees. This is what our badges look like. So I'm giving you some information, but I don't give you everything of how to actually get in and then onto the network. That's more of a gray box, right? And so from these different standpoints, it's better to come from a black box standpoint because you get a more accurate report of where you're vulnerable at and then where we can actually make those changes at. The problem is that these these pen tests happen during business hours, and you don't want to lose productivity because we're testing the network, or we're testing policies, or we're testing users, and it causes an inconvenience. So your higher ups may be against that type of training during business hours, but in order to get a real live good sense of it, you might want to have it done during business hours. But that's something that you and your business can sit down and hash out. But on the other hand, some companies have enough money to actually have a penetration team um, within the organization. So that's the only thing they do, is that they break up into these kind of different teams, and then they all are responsible for uh, doing their role. So let's go through the different types of teams that you may see on your pen testers within the company. So you have your red team, and they're going to probably be on a offensive role, that's actually performing the attacks, making sure that, hey, we know where we want to go, we know what our goal is, our flag to capture, so to say, and then we're going to go about attacking the company in this way. Our blue teams is going to be on the defensive side, where, okay, that's going to be probably, pretending to be your security analyst, and so forth, to make sure that they have things in place, defenses set up in order to see the attacks or be alerted of the attacks and then actually react to them. Then you have your white teams. Your white teams are probably going to be your officiators over the whole exercise. So they will have the boundaries of where things can go and how long it can take. Now, again, I'm not a fan of having rules in this type of war, because um, in real life, attackers don't care about rules. It's about getting the main objective done. But anyway, I digress. Purple teams will set up the actual collaboration between the two different teams, and actually come up with the lesson learns after the fact. So you can have these different teams break up into this one big department, break up into different teams, and we can actually play scenarios of how we can actually see the vulnerabilities and then attack, how are they being attacked, and then what are we doing to remediate. Now, a pen tester might use some of this, once they get their engagement rules, they may go about doing reconnaissance in different types of ways, right? Um, I think the most popular way is to just do a social engineering attack, where I just kind of take someone out to lunch, or I just have kind of like this water cooler talk within the business about what's going on, and then try to maneuver my way around them to see avenues on where I can get onto the network. You can also do like a scans, like we talked earlier about different scans to create a footprint of the network, and then make your entry that way. We can use open source intelligence, and this is your simple pulling up a web browser, Googling whoever, and seeing how much information is out there. You'll be surprised about how much information you can just find off of a simple Google search, or searching on your favorite social media website. I tell you, a good place to go is LinkedIn. And if you're doing a pen test, why not be able to, look at everybody who works at that place, as well as they'll give you a full rundown on the business profile page. So um, you could do a lot of reconnaissance there. And then once you have your information of how you want to attack, then we can, you know, go deeper into how to exploit each entryway that's possible, right? And then hopefully, from a pen tester's point of view or from a hacker point of view, one of those things are open, and then it's on to the next level, right? So I want to make sure that when I say that um, hackers and pen testers are looking for one way of getting in, then one way of traversing, and then one way of opening files. When they go from one section to another section to another section, it's kind of like we need to have defenses there for each level that they get to. This is what we call defense in depth. So it's not just having your firewall up in place. It's not just having your networks sectored off in the VLANs. It's not just having your antivirus on your PC. It's having all of these things in different possible places, because you never know where somebody is going to pick up and say, hey, I'm gonna start my intrusion here. So, like I was saying before, having that defensive depth will pretty much uh, handle a pen test pretty good, because just like this life cycle where you want to have a foothold to the exploit, you want to actually do some persistence, have that privilege edge of escalation, lateral movement if possible, pivoting if possible. All these things can be remediated if we have certain policies in place, certain configurations in place, and certain infrastructure standpoints in place, to where, you know, it makes a pen tester even more, having his life or her life be even more tougher, because they just can't go and do whatever on the network, and then you really never made it hard for them to, you know, get to the goal of seeing the HR department server. So we need to put things in place in order to eliminate, you know, at least one of these actions, right? Where even if you're able to get onto the network, that I don't need for you to compromise an account and making sure that uh, Gary from the mailroom has admin accounts or admin privileges to where he can see anything that's on the network. So it plays a hand in hand when you start planning for, or you see the reports that come from a pen test, that we can put these things into play, and that we can actually put those things to modify our security posture to become more secure. So in summary, we went over a multitude of things. Thank you for sticking with me on that. But we started off talking about reconnaissance tools such as Wireshark, Nmap, NSLOOKUP, Metasploit. We also talked about patch management, being able to understand our vulnerabilities and then applying patches whenever we have tested and actually need to put out there in the production field. We also talked about different vulnerabilities, not just physical, not just software. It could be social. It could be, when I say social, I mean more people. It could be, those are our vulnerabilities. How do we coach up people to have a better security posture and have a better security awareness about them? We also talked about pen testing and the importance of seeing it from a hacker's point of view, and how do we actually put defense in depth in order to make their lives a little bit harder when it comes to getting onto our network and traversing around. So I would say to, you know, go over this section several times over, and I'll see you in the next lesson. So lesson 4, identifying social engineering and malware. One of my favorite subjects. Social engineering is all around us, happening all the time. So let's move forward. So social engineering is pretty much the manipulation of a human, being able to lie. That's just basically it. Is lying, right? It's telling you whatever you want to hear in order for me to get whatever I want to get. So hacking of the human. If you want to go that route, that's fine. But it's just pretty much be able to get the information out of you versus me actually going and hacking into a firewall. Why should I do that when I have researched you and I know that your favorite school is USC? So guess what? I'm gonna say that I went to USC and I played on the football team, and we're gonna strike up a nice conversation with you, and that's me starting my process of social engineering. Now that was a good example of just kind of being, familiar with someone, being able to be a likable person, and then I could take that conversation into, hey, what do you do? Oh yeah, well, I work in this sector too, and you know what, we're able to help out in any way possible to different types of businesses, and formulate this wild drawn out story of how I can make your life better, which all of this is could be a lie, and then I'm going to you to see how far you will go. Maybe you will show me the interface to the server. Maybe you will give me a credential to log in because you have taken so much liking to me that you're just trying to make your day better at work, right? And this is how social engineering comes off as such a strong factor, because people in general just want to help. Um, we do not want to be mean to each other. It's not necessarily a militant type of way where we want to have militant principles. Human nature is not built out that way. So having a familiarity or a liking to someone is a big part of social engineering. Um, you could also come at someone with an authoritative or an intimidation factor. Um, let's give another example of you're working, let's say you're working at the front desk, and I come in with a, um, a Best Buy Geek Squad shirt on, right? And I'm mad. I'm just, you don't know me from nobody, right? And I just walk through the door and I'm mad and I'm pissed off, and I'm just saying, hey, I told them to make sure that the server was on this channel, this port. I'm speaking all this jargon, and I'm just saying, hey, I need to get to the server room ASAP. I don't have time to wait. I got several other clients out here waiting. And you, as a front desk helper, you're not, only thing you want is just a smooth, calm personality. You're not expecting a brash, straightforward person. So you may take me to the actual closet, just to kind of, because that tension is there, and people will try their best to avoid that. But that's social engineering at its best too. So we need to be aware of that type of stuff, awareness training, make sure that our users are aware that these are the type of attacks that are not so brainy, right? They don't need to, again, they don't need to brute force your password when you'll just take me to the server. So the example that I just gave that, an example of me impersonating a Geek Squad member. But I can also dress up in a suit and act like I'm a CFO for your competitor, in whatever industry. And let's say if it's a school system, and I'm dressing up as the principal to the across the street school, or the cross town rival school. I'm the principal of there, and then I'm going over to say, hey, you guys stole da 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 da, and I'm impersonating power to get what I want. And what I want is something totally different. I mean, it's kind of hard to tell what people actually want just by a conversation. So again, just kind of having the wherewithal of what's going on, and understanding that our users are the weakest link, because they already have access to our network. We have already trusted them. But if they are weak-minded when it comes to different types of social engineering attacks, then it's an easy walk-in for, let's say, that pen tester to just get onto the network and do what they need to do. So dumpster diving and tailgating. I'm gonna get back to dumpster diving in a second because I think it's funny. But tailgating, is again, people, we don't want to be rude, or we don't want any kind of issues off the bat, or just in first sight. You're not trying to really be rude to anybody, right? I grew up in the South where holding the door for someone is polite, is what you have been taught to do. But let's say if you're in a place of business and we're going out there, and someone's carrying boxes in. They're impersonating let's say a UPS driver, and they're impersonating carrying a bunch of boxes. Your natural instinct is to hold the door for them. But that's tailgating in, right? That's having them not check in with the front desk or show a badge or sign a piece of paper saying that, hey, we are allowing you onto the premises. It's just it skips that whole process because I want to be nice. I don't want no issues with this guy. He's just trying to have a hard day's worth of work. I'm not gonna interrupt him by saying, hey, go sign in, and he got a bunch of boxes. But if he doesn't work for them, then it's for naught, right? And then now you could be the issue on why the company was hacked, because we let someone in by tailgating. Now, dumpster diving, I think it's funny because the great lengths that people will go through just to get information off a company. If you're not properly shredding or burning or destroying the data that's physical on paper, or let's say CDs or something like that, if you're still using CDs, and you just throw them out into the dumpster, it's too easy for someone to just jump into the dumpster, pull the bag out, and just go home. And now all the information that they need is there. If in every baking system that I've seen, they're actually shredding the paper. But if you don't have a cross shredder, you just have a shredder that shreds up and down, then how easy or if I'm really dedicated, I'll jump into the dumpster, get the bags, take them home. I ain't got nothing else to do. I'm a hacker. I'm gonna just piece together the papers and get the information that I need. But if we have a cross shred, or we have one that, in some cases I've seen where people burn those important papers, then, we eliminate that type of attack. So I think we all are aware of fraud and how it works, and having invoices scanned, as far scams, as far as someone sending you an email with the invoice saying, um, you've ordered such and such. Make sure you click this link to make sure that your packages is received and correct, and they go into this whole thing of maybe stealing your credentials if they send you to a website that has you to log in. But I wanted to really highlight the shoulder surfing as well as the lunchtime attack. These two attacks are very easy to do, as well as they're common in the everyday workforce from what I've seen. Shoulder surfing is just exactly what it is. You're looking over someone's shoulder onto their screen to see what type of information is being inputted. So how do we eliminate that? Is we'll have these privacy screens that we can place onto our monitors. If you have a laptop, that the monitor screen can have a screen protector on it. It looks like a screen protector, but it's actually a privacy screen kind of film that goes over the screen. And then now, if you're not directly in front of the PC, then it shows as if it's a blank screen. So I've seen only maybe one place that has that in place to guard against shoulder surfing. And then lunchtime attacks is when Alice is done typing for the front part of the workday and it's 12 o'clock, and now she goes to lunch, but she forgets to log out or lock her computer in order to go to lunch. She just leaves it open, and then someone can easily sit down and gather around, go around and traverse around the network with her credentials, looking into different things, especially if she works in an important department, let's say in finance. Then she probably can have a lot of access to data that no one else should be able to see. Now you could say, Lee, well, if they're not in the department, then that should be fine. But if I impose, like on the previous scenarios, if I'm personating a Geek Squad member and I'm saying I'm looking for Alice, and she's gone for that time being, they say, hey, we could take you to her desk. She's gone for the day, or she's gone for a hour and a half for lunch. Oh, well, yeah, it's not going to take me long. It'll take me 15 minutes to do what I got to do. If I'm impersonating someone else, I don't even have to log in. She doesn't have to see me log in. I can attack her computer that way. So phishing, whaling, and vishing. We all know what phishing is. If we're not familiar, then we're talking about fake emails that will guide you to clicking on links or putting in information that is not from the sender that you thought it was. And if you want to see good examples of them, you don't really have to wait until it shows up in your inbox. Just go take a look at your spam box anytime, and you'll just see, unwanted mail. Back in the day, we would think of this as junk mail, right? But today we have phishing. Phishing can be very tailored to mimic any type of company that you may be in dealings with. A good fish that I seen lately was a fish that came in that had a Amazon logo on it, and it had the same font and color that Amazon uses for their little smile. So it's that little orange orange color that they have. Very authentic. Even came down to the small fine print at the bottom of the email was on point. It almost had me, but once I looked at the who is it from, that email there, I could tell that it was a fish. Now, spear phishing is when an attacker targets in on one particular person or a particular group. Let's say if I'm going after Alice and she's in the marketing department of U.S. Bank, I'm targeting her in particular. So I'm spear. That how if you ever seen a spear fish, people do spear fishing. It's has a arrow and it's for a particular fish, right? Marlin at that. But anyway, whaling. So you have whaling, and that's for your more senior management positions. So it's fish campaigns or phishing emails for your CEOs, your CFOs, your department heads, members of the board, people who are in these management type of positions. When they get tailored emails to kind of trick them into clicking on links, that's called whaling. Phishing is pretty much running a social scam over the phone, right? So that's someone cold calling. Right now we are in a time where robot calling is at an all-time high. And then finally we have smishing, and that's where we see kind of like these unwanted IM messages, whether it's an Android or iPhone, wherever you get a text message and it's not wanted, right? It tells you, hey, click on this link to receive a new gift card from Amazon. And they're trying to mislead you into thinking to click on the link, put in the information, and then whatever attack comes from that is the results of it. So I already kind of got on the spam uh, in the previous slide. It's unwanted email, unsolicited email. People are probably, they have you on an email list where whoever sold them the list, where they actually harvest a whole bunch of emails, and now maybe they're trying to promote their new late night sports bar, and they have you on an email list. And a lot of our email providers will have that type of emails go off into your spam. Now, I said to go and look in your spam inbox to look at good examples of fish, because a lot of times you will see a lot of phishing campaigns in your spam box. Moving on to hoax, in the latter day of the internet, we started to see a lot of hoax go on with the uprising of Facebook, a lot of social media, such as Twitter, Instagram. They started to, once they really started to catch hold and move up into the scale, you started to see a lot of people wanting more traffic to go through their channel. So you might see a hoax go on, such as someone saying that Bill Cosby passed, or Eddie Murphy has passed, and it was soon caught on that, hey, these people are not dead. This is what we call a hoax, a fake story to get you to actually go ahead and click on the item and see if we can drive more traffic to wherever we wanted to go. Now, in the case of an attacker, if I have this catching link here with this title, what they call kind of clickbaiting, if I can clickbait you into this hoax that I have up, then I could probably maybe have you download some things onto your PC without you knowing it. So having these passive techniques, an attacker can take traffic that's, you know, redirected from their normal course of browsing and direct them to malicious sites in order to collect whatever data that they may want from the traffic. So in the security world, we call this farming. That's redirecting domain names, sites to malicious actor sites. Typo squatting is also a different type of redirection, but what it does is that it takes the mistakes that a person may make and then have them to redirect into a malicious site. A good example will be if I'm an attacker and I make a website that's named google.com, but I spell it with 3 O's instead of 2 O's, then whenever someone makes a mistake and puts in 3 O's, maybe they're sleepy or whatever, and then they're redirected to my website instead of a normal Google site. So that's a poor or a very basic example of typo squatting, but it works. A watering hole is similar type, where we're kind of we're setting up places to where people can gather and want to go and get information, making it real attractive to people who want to click on different sites. A good example is trying to have a host of something that's really eye-catching, right? Really intriguing, and then we send them to a third-party site that's there for malicious reasons. Okay, let's switch gears now and go into the indicators of malware-based attacks. So malware classification. It's important to understand that you're gonna see on the test viruses and worms. And what to really remember about it is that worms can spread from PC to PC, device to device. It doesn't need to actually be carried from one person to another, right? Such as a virus or a Trojan, where I have to send you an executable to actually execute the payload, and then it spreads like that. A worm is pretty much uncontrollable and can go out there and spread on its own. Now a Trojan is where it's concealed to be one thing, but then it turns out to be malicious, right? Back in the day, we used to see this with toolbars. So back in the day, web browsers didn't come with toolbars on there, so we couldn't really have our little favorites hanging up there and at the top. You had to download it. And I remember downloading something from Ask Jeeves, and it was, I want to say it was a Google toolbar. But anyway, it was a toolbar that, once you ran the executable on something, it was a Trojan. And, the antivirus at that time detected it and it cleaned it. But that was a good example of a Trojan. I want something for this purpose, but then it ended up being something totally different, right? Just like the real Trojan horse was meant to be a gift, but in the end, it ended up, changing how that war went. So we also have things like spyware, adware, and keyloggers. Now, adware is where you have advertisers come onto your PC and they constantly have pop-ups almost. That's kind of annoying, if anything. So the latest ones that I've seen, it kind of comes up in the lower right-hand corner, and it tells you to get a new coupon for Dawn dish detergent, and that's a advertising type of malware, right? Um, Spyware is a malware that's actually looking at your activity, um, and it may even redirect you when it comes to your browsing. Keyloggers also have that spying ability where it's recording your keystrokes as you're typing when you're typing usernames, passwords, and websites. We also have backdoor malware. That's where uh, you can have a front-facing application where what the users see, but in the back end of it, administrators can go in and actually make changes to it to where the user doesn't see it. And then once the maintenance is over, then the changes will be shown on the front side. And a lot of times, if malware it has affected an application such in that manner that it can make the back door open to access of making changes or taking out uh, so rootkits are viruses that live on the root of the machine. So when we're talking about a PC booting up, you will see that kind of like a black screen and maybe some white writing that's coming across the screen. That is where we're talking where that virus will live at. And it's important to have your firmware updated as much as possible whenever it does change. Make sure that it's up to date because we can develop rootkits that sit there and we won't even know because it's only staying on that screen for maybe 2 to 3 seconds at a time, and then we go into our operating system. But if a virus is sitting there on the root of the machine, then it has admin privileges throughout the machine, and we won't even know that it's there unless we update our firmware on an annual basis. So ransomware is a type of malware that gets onto your computer and locks the files up from access. And in order to get your assets to those files back, you need to pay a ransom, some type of money fee, in order to get those files back. Now, what they do is they basically use an encryption on your files, and they just keep the other side of the key. And we'll go over this a little bit more in encryption, but whenever they'll say, hey, okay, you paid us in Bitcoin, we'll go ahead and give you the files back. What they do is they just apply the key that's needed in order to uncrypt it or decrypt it, and then you're able to get your files back. Now, as a measure point moving forward as a security professional, we should never pay for ransomware. We should always fight ransomware by having backups of our files somewhere, somehow. And I would never pay for any type of files to be unencrypted. Your best bet will just be probably wiping that machine and then carrying on after that, and just wiping the machine and then rebuilding the machine from the backups that you already had. So if you're a professional that actually goes into the field and you realize that the backup plans that they have in place are not adequate, then they may be having a bigger risk of ransomware than what they are bargaining for. Because if someone says, hey, we locked you out for 14 Bitcoin, that's around $35,000-$40,000, are you willing to pay that and then hope that you cleaned everything off in order to continue business? Or do you just want to just say, hey, all right, well, you can have those files locked up, that's fine. We can go ahead and continue business by just wiping this computer clean and then reissuing out a computer from the backups. So what are some indicators that you may have malware on your PC or Mac? I think the most obvious thing is if your antivirus actually gives you a notification. Um, a lot of times these things are built off of um, signature-based databases. So if there's a known signature of a virus out there, your AV should be able to pick that up and alert you and clean or quarantine that file immediately. You can also pay attention to if there are any kind of file changes that's going on without your awareness. So it's kind of late at that point, but if you see any kind of file changes within the registry or temp files, then it's a good indication that you might want to run a scan on it, and you might want to unplug it from a network or disconnect from a network, and then run your antivirus scan on it, and then try to clean whatever is there. If all else fails and you still feel as if something's on the PC, then I will say a full wipe of the PC is necessary, and then restore from backups. So key points to review on lesson 4, I would definitely go over social engineering, making sure that we understand that our weakest point of our security posture are our users. Again, it is much more easier for me to take you out to lunch and versus me breaking into your firewall. The second thing we talked about was phishing and the different types of phishing, spear phishing, welling, vishing. We also talked about spam and having those unsolicited emails come in. We finished up with malware and talking about different types of computer viruses that may happen, rootkits that can live onto the root of the PC, and making sure how important it is to making sure everything is up to date as far as AV is concerned, and making sure that we understand the indicators of viruses. Okay, lesson 5, let's go into basic cryptography concepts. We're not going to dive greatly into encryption because encryption is by itself is confusing. So we're going to go over the basics and how CompTIA wants you to know different concepts for the Security Plus exam. Um, when you start talking about cryptography, the first thing you want to know is that encryption is taking readable plain text and turning it into something that's unreadable, and that's going to be your ciphertext. A lot of times when you hear security professionals give scenarios about encryption, they're using characters named Bob and Alice, and Mallory will be a malicious hacker or malware that's sitting in between them, disturbing the conversation. So in the scenario with Bob and Alice, Bob or Alice wants to communicate and they want to share secure information in some type of way, and they understand that Mallory could be lurking and could be listening on the network. So what they want to do is to take the sensitive information, encrypt it into a way that is unreadable by Mallory, and pass it on to the other, and then have them unencrypted or decrypt into a readable text again. So as we go along, just be aware of those characters, and that's the concept of how we actually want to go back and forth and take those readable text, make it unreadable, and then readable again. Now we'll also go over hashing algorithms and how it relates to integrity, and that how we can take a hash of a some type of plain text and make it kind of like a fingerprint. Is only unique to that actual plain text, and we'll go over that in further detail. Now, the one thing that you need to understand is that there's two types of encryption. There's symmetric and then there's asymmetric, and we will go over that in greater detail. But symmetric, we're using one key and it's the same key, right? So it's the same on both sides. When Alice, she encrypts it, she's using one key, and then when Bob decrypts it, he's using the same key. And then we have asymmetric keys, asymmetric cryptography. So that's when Alice uses a unique key and Bob uses a unique key as well. So it's asymmetric. It's two keys involved. Okay, but we'll go over that in further detail. So let's talk about hashing algorithms. Hashing is a good way of showing integrity of a software or whatever message that you want to actually take a hash of. It's actually putting a message or a document against a algorithm and then taking a message digest, a fixed string, and saying that that's unanimous to the original document. And we have many different ways that we can create hashes. But one thing I want you to remember when taking the Security Plus exam is that is 9 times out of 10 going to be used for integrity reasons. So if that message digest that results from your hash comes out to be different than anything that it originally started off as, then the integrity of that document has been compromised. But hashing is not an encryption, right? Hashing uses the word algorithm because that's what the document or whatever you're putting into that hash or you want to take a hash of is applied by. But hashing is not a two-factor form like encryption is. Encryption takes something that is normal and then it takes it, encrypts it into an unreadable text, and then it has that form to have the ability to be decrypted. And hashing is not that. Hashing is more of a one-way process where this is what it is, and you need to actually undo that in order to see the original result. So just keep that in mind. We also want to make sure that we keep the algorithms that we use for hashing as well as for encryption secret. We don't want those things to get out. We don't want those things to fall in the wrong hands. So always keeping the algorithm safe when it comes to hashing, and then keeping your keys safe whenever it comes to encryption is always an important thing. So symmetric encryption is the first type of encryption we want to talk about. This is where we use the same keys to encrypt a message as well as our recipient using that same key to decrypt a message. So in the example that you see on the screen, Alice has a email that she wants to send to Bob, and she will use a key to encrypt the message, and Bob will use the same key to decrypt the message. Now the thing about that is that how do we get the key over to Bob? Do we use a in-band way of doing it where we'll just use, stay on the same network and send the key over the same network? Let's say an example of that would be sending an email that's separate of the message, the encrypted message, and it would contain the key. Or we will use a out of band method where we'll call on the phone and give them the key over the phone. We could have it mailed in a physical mail to Bob, some method like that of being out of band. So remember for the test that symmetric means the same, and in order to decrypt or unencrypt a message, we need that same key. Now, some examples of symmetric keys or symmetric algorithms being used will be streaming ciphers, where this is going to encrypt one bit at a time. You're going to also see it being used with an initialized vector, and we'll get a little bit more into initialized vectors or IVs a little bit later. You also see it in block ciphers, and this is kind of where we are encrypting blocks at a time, big chunks of blocks at a time, and you'll see examples of this in AES, Advanced Encryption Standards. Is no longer a more secure. It's not a secure way of encrypting, but that's where you can see that example of. And then you'll also see things like the key length being a key factor when it comes to symmetric keys. Always remember that the longer the key, the better the more security that goes along with that key. So remember, the key strength is a big part when it comes to encrypting in these algorithms. Now, the opposite of symmetric encryption, we have asymmetric encryption. So this is where we get into key pairs. The problem that we had with symmetric keys is that we had to actually distribute that key out. So the most popular form of public key encryption will be the RSA algorithm. RSA stands for Rivers, Shamir, and Edelman. These are the three guys who created this cryptography algorithm. So just be mindful of that. Understand that when it comes to public keys, this is the best way to actually perform encryption across the network. We're not going over that concept of sharing keys in order to encrypt messages and then send them abroad. So um, when it comes to public key encryption, the only problem is key making sure that everyone has two keys. So keeping a management of those keys can be an issue, and we'll go over that a little bit different later. So digital signatures. One thing I want you guys to really think about when it comes to digital signatures is the application that we normally use in order to have digital signatures go on, and that's DocuSign is the one that I come across a lot. So let's say if you're buying a house or you're doing some kind of paperwork for a school, and they send you some documentation that they need you to sign that you would normally sign in person, but we want to sign it over the network over the internet. So they send it to you in an email and they want to verify that you signed this piece of paper and then send it back, which is electronically signed, right? So the way we do that is by using an application called DocuSign, and it uses cryptography along with hashing in order to say, hey, this signature came from Jane Doe, and there's no way to say that it came from any other person. Okay, so it creates that integrity piece that we need in order to say, hey, there's no doubt in my mind, there's no non-repudiation part of it, that this could be signed by anyone else. And that's what digital signatures bring to the table. So whenever you guys see digital signatures, think about it as a way of translating your handwritten signature into a digital signature that authorizes documentations. Digital certificates is a way that a website can perform a public key exchange with your device or any other device by having the certificate verified by a CA, which is a certificate authority, and then having it pasted onto their website. So whenever you go to a website and it has the HTTPS on there, and then you click on that and you see the certificate for it, you can see who they registered that certificate with, and then um, how long the certificate is valid for, and you can have a good idea that, hey, this website is legit and I can go about doing regular business with this website. So with a certificate authority, I want you to think of it kind of like a DMV for driver license. So when you go to the DMV, they are a third party that gives you the right to have a license or some type of ID. And now you carry that ID around and you give it to authorities or whoever wants to see that ID to verify that you are who you say you are. And the same thing goes with a certificate authority. I want to say that I'm mitchelltech.com. And so when I go to my certificate authority and I say, hey, I'm starting up my own website for mitchelltech.org, I want you to give me some type of validation. And they will hand me or send me a digital certificate um, and showing that I am the website who I claim to be. And so now when you go to my website and you look at my certificates, you can trust that I have the public keys. I have a public key that I shared with you, and it has the integrity factor that I am who I say I am. Now, as a security professional, you want to teach people to be wary of certificates that have expired or websites who don't have certificates. Because now, how can we really validate who they say they are? So we want to make sure that we keep these things in mind whenever navigating the different types of websites. If you see kind of like that HTTPS crossed out, or sometimes some browsers will actually say, hey, this site is not trusted. Do you want to continue? Just be fearful about it and know that it may not be who you want to communicate with. So be fearful of the type of information that you're putting in on that website. And we want to have that type of secrecy whenever we're going to different websites, and have that type of privacy and integrity whenever we're sharing different types of information on websites. So having that cryptography factor in your certificates says that, hey, it's not so easy to replicate who I am as far as a website is concerned. And then you have that non-repudiation factor put in there. And remember, non-repudiation says that I cannot deny that it came from who it came from. So whenever I can say this is who I am on the internet and I have that validation, then it's more comforting when I'm a bank account or I'm a bank website and you're trying to get into your bank account and you have that integrity factor checked off, that you know that, hey, I'm gonna transfer $1,000 and I have full confidence that it's going to go to the account that I want it to, or I can take it from the account that I see. So, and I don't have to worry about other people um, looking at that information while I'm communicating to this website. We stated before how hashing can support integrity. Well, we always want to keep in mind that cryptography supports confidentiality. This is where we want to make sure that others are not being able to see things that or data that they should not see. So this is, in turn, the reason why you have file encryptions, making sure that we're using an encrypted cryptography, sending traffic over the network. So just remember that if you see anything or hear anyone saying that we need to support confidentiality, we want to make sure that we keep the things hidden from unnecessary views. Then we are probably looking at some form of cryptography. Now, a lot of times when we see attacks on different websites or attacks against cryptography, is probably going to be some type of man in the middle of attack, kind of sitting on your network, sniffing that traffic. And remember, whenever I'm saying sitting on your network or sniffing the traffic, I'm probably using a tool such as Wireshark or some type of network analyzer to see what traffic is going from point A to point B, and I'm taking that and seeing if I can decipher it into plain text in some type of way. But that's why we want to have cryptography to actually cover that thing, that type of traffic up, making sure that it's not readable, it's not necessarily in plain text, and so that's why it's so important to make sure that we have um, cryptography when it comes to network traffic going back and forth. They could also use a downgrade attack. This is where we're taking advantage of old obsolete devices and seeing if, or taking a vulnerability on a device that's already out there, seeing if we could downgrade the software to a known vulnerable software piece, and then taking advantage of it from that standpoint. So just keep those things in mind. 9 times out of 10 in the real world, you're going to probably see these man in the middle attacks, and that's just someone sitting on your network, just looking at the traffic going back and forth. So just be careful of your surroundings, as well as when you're going to like coffee shops such as Starbucks or some type of internet cafe, and you're sitting down, or let's say in a hotel, and you're connecting to that Wi-Fi. Just think about who else could be actually there, just taking in that traffic. So just keep those things in mind before you actually start sharing uh, confidential documents across the network. One of the main factors that helps cryptography be more difficult to break is the factors of key stretching and salting. Making the key bigger or longer will create more of a hassle for the attacker to actually brute force in, or when it comes to them trying to actually outsmart the the cryptography, it takes a longer time to actually figure this type of process out. So key stretching is always good, right? And then salting is also adding that random value to whatever algorithm that you have. So it's nice to have the algorithm, but when we can put some type of randomness to it, then it also gives a extra factor that the attacker may not be accounting for. So just keep those two things in mind, that we want to make the key stronger by stretching, and we want to make it more random by adding a salt. We also want to talk about steganography, and steganography is being able to hide data within a plain sight. A lot of times you'll see the example of hiding a document within a image file or a video file, and that's you're sending the video file or the image out of, let's say, your network. So you're sending that image via email outside of the network. But if we're in a if we're working together as hackers or as someone malicious within the network, then you will know that I probably embedded an important Excel document within that image. And so that's what we call steganography, hiding something that's in plain sight. So lesson six, implementing a public key infrastructure. Having a symmetric key infrastructure, or having symmetric keys, is when two parties are using the same key. But when we want to use a asymmetric format, we want to make sure that everyone has a different key or two sets of keys, and we're able to give out our public key to the public and decrypt anything with our private key. So let's look at how we can take that concept of having a asymmetric format and then putting it into how we use it in everyday life. So let's go over symmetric keys for a second. So in symmetric keys, when we're doing symmetric cryptography, I encrypt with a certain key, and then I send you the message. In order for you to see the message, you need to decrypt with that same key that I had. And the problem is that how do I get you that key secretly, or how can I say, it's not necessarily a great idea to pick up the phone and say, hey, all right, you got the message. Okay, to decrypt it, you need this passcode right here. Put in this passcode and it decrypts the message. It's more efficient, and it's more efficient to use two sets of keys, which is public key infrastructure. But when you're talking about asymmetric keys, just think about how many things that we want to encrypt, and then how many keys we need to actually decrypt those things, and then send them outer band or in band. And when I mean outer band, I'm meaning more like something that's not necessarily on the network. So I'm mailing you. I'm going to use the postal service to mail you the key, or I'm going to tell it to you over the telephone. But in band, I'm going to, walk it to your office or use the network to send it to you in a instant message. So that's in band, out of band. All right. So public key, and using a public key infrastructure, we're going to use two sets of keys. So me, Lee Mitchell, I will have two keys. I will have a public key and I will have a private key. And then you, Jane Doe, will have a public key and a private key. And so whenever I want to send you something, I will use my public key to decrypt it, or I use my private key to decrypt it, and then you use my public key to decrypt it. And then the vice versa for you. When you want to send me something, you would encrypt it with your private key. I'm sorry. And then you will send it to me, and then I will use your public key to decrypt it. So the concept is this. The public key is public for anyone to see. It doesn't matter if they see your public key. But your private key is only for you and only for your eyes only. If someone gets your private key, we have a problem. So you can decrypt and encrypt with your private key. And you can decrypt with someone else's public key. That makes sense? I know I'm saying it over and over again, but just the concept of what I'm saying in this slide is this. You have a public key and a private key, and you're going to give out your public key. So whenever someone wants to talk to you privately, encryptedly, they're going to use your public key to decrypt it, to encrypt it, and then you'll use your private key to decrypt it. Okay. So in that essence, we use we take that format and then we apply it to websites when it's saying when we start talking about digital certificates or just the PKI's infrastructure. And just to kind of go into the infrastructure name, when we're talking about PKI, it's a system of keys and how we actually have that structured out, because everyone having a pair key system, it sounds great, but when you think about how many keys everyone needs, it can stack up fairly quick and can get out of management hands even quicker. So we want to make sure that we put in a infrastructure, some type of system to where we can manage the keys, and we can scale. We can be able to have it at a scalable point. So if we want to add in new websites, bring in new personnel, everyone can still communicate securely, and we are not overwhelming whoever's owning the keys, the public key infrastructure system, by having them, develop new keys for everyone. Now, certificate authorities or CAs, when I talked about it in the last slides, is that whenever you're creating a website, or you want to get your website registered, you want to check in with the CA in order to say, hey, I want to validate who I say I am on the internet. And they're going to give you a certificate saying that, oh, okay, mentaltech.org is exactly who they say they are, because they have this certificate of and it validates who they say they are. And you will see your public key within that certificate. Now, whoever comes to your website is able to communicate securely with you, because they have your public key. And so now if you wanted to encrypt any type of information, that's possible, because we have checked in with the certificate authority. And I said it in the last slide that I want you to think of it kind of like a DMV, someone who validates someone else. So you will go to the DMV to get your validation of, hey, I'm allowed to drive a car, and I can also sub that license out as a form of ID. And everyone else, let's say if you want to get in the club that night, someone will look at that and say, okay, you are who they say you are, because I trust the DMV, right? And so that's what we do when we go to these different websites, is that you see the green HTTPS with the little lock on it, and you say, hey, I trust the fact that I just see that. You didn't even really check to see if the authority was a valid one, but we trust that. And then we will say, hey, okay, I'm willing to type in my username and password here at facebook.com, and I have no worries that it's not being hacked or sniffed upon by any kind of unwanted entity. And as you see here on this slide, this is a pretty much a certificate that you get from your CA once you open it up. You can actually, no matter if you're on Windows or Mac, you can find your certificates that's probably somewhere on your PC, and you always kind of refer back to them just for the validity or the validation of whatever that website may be. So we want to just go in and, if we want to see who issued this certificate, we could see who issued the certificate, as well as what type of encryption did they use. And in this case, we see SHA-256 was used in order to encrypt the website, as well as we can look further. I think in the general tab, we could probably see how long is the certificate is actually validated for. And just like, you would go to the DMV and you would fill out information that's about you and maybe your vehicle that you're driving. You would do the same things with these CAs. You would just fill out information of the type of website that you have, what services do you actually provide, and you would they will come up with a encryption for your site, and then they will email you um, your certificate. And now, now you could say, once you put that on your website, you can say, hey, I am who I say I am, and you can trust me as a validated website here. So if you want to buy a t-shirt from my website, feel free. Know that you can put in that debit card or that credit card number and feel safe by the steps that we have taken as a company to get certified through this certificate authority. So on this slide, you're going to see a certificate that's actually opened up from my browser, and it pretty much has the different types of attributes that comes with your certificate from your CA. So on the right hand side, you'll see kind of the different types of attributes, and then the short description of what you will see. But you don't really need to know each attribute for the exam, but just be aware that all these different things make up an identity of who you're trying to be, or what website is trying to say or validate who they are. So you'll have a serial number, a signature algorithm. You'll have that validation date. When is a certificate is going to expire. Something to keep in mind so you don't run into the issue of having expired certificates on your website. You'll also see a public key there as well. And that's where, when other machines or other servers or devices connect to your machine, that's what they're going to use to validate any type of public key infrastructure going back and forth. So that's how we're going to say, hey, if I want to send something to you secretly, I'm going to use your public key to encrypt that information. Now, just to dive a little bit deeper into the subject name of the attribute, you'll normally have a common name, which you go by www.mitchelltech.org. But you can also have other friendly names that you have or associated with put onto your certificate. So let's just say if my company name is Mitchell Technologies LLC, but I shorten it up by saying Mitchell Tech. So I can still put both names into my certificate. So whenever someone types in that name and the DNS still points it back to my website, I still have the same certificate to validate those different name configurations. So just understand that you can have different types of subdomains that you want to put in there, whether it could be mitchelltech.labs, or I'm sorry, mitchelltech.org/labs, could be a subdomain for it, or you can do a host of subdomains, which is, in this case, they use a wildcard. That's that star factor. So if you look at the picture here, you'll see the DNS name equals a star factor and then a .comptia.org. So that star represents a multitude of sub pages on that website. So it could be marketplace .comptia.org, or it could be labs.comptia.org, and that star just says, hey, whatever the vendor or that person decides to make as a sub page, we're going to accept that and use the certificate for it. So the certificate and key management, the main thing that we want to understand is that we want to avoid aspirations or having our website be unsecure at that point in time, because we haven't paid attention to when our certificates needed to be renewed. So making sure that we have a good audit pace or trail of our certificates is very vital in order to keep that secure line going. There's nothing, not saying that your company would not run, but would you want to spend money with a company that's couldn't necessarily validate the security on their site? It says, hey, whenever you see a website that has a expired certificate, it will have this big red line through, or the HTTPS is kind of grayed out, and it kind of makes you feel weary about putting in debit card numbers or credit card numbers within that website. So you're not necessarily losing customers because you can still order something, but you may lose a lot of customers off of the integrity factor, the mindset of saying, hey, I can't trust this site, so therefore I can't trust the business there. So you lose business in that aspect. So we want to make sure that we keep those things up to date, and we understand when our certificates are going to go into expiration. So just to kind of give you a visual, this is how it looks whenever your certificate has expired. You're gonna get your different browsers give you these type of error codes right here, and you can continue on to the site. It's just saying on, let's say for the example of Internet Explorer, that it's not recommended. So you can see how that can drive away traffic if you are a consumer. So just making sure that we have those things under wraps when it comes to knowing when things are going to expire, very vital to business operations. So, like I said, you have different types of certificate issues, such as rejection from the servers or your clients. And when I mean by clients, not necessarily the person, but the device that they're using. They're not able to uh, be able to connect securely to your website. And we want to avoid that by any stretch of the imagination. So, just making sure that we keep a good um, audit trail of what do we obtain as far as certificates, because when you think about a business may have several different websites that all offer different things, and we want to be able to be secure and know that we're not just mistaking for anybody else. So having our certificates all lined up is a good business practice because it keeps us from running and presents ourselves to the world in a secure manner. So we just want to, at all costs, make sure that we stress the fact of having expired certificates taken care of before the expiration date, making sure that we have the proper names and subdomains added on to our certificates is very, I would say, a business oriented factor that we need to have in. So just keeping these things in mind when it comes to the different types of issues that we may face. Just know that for the exam, when it comes to the problems that you may come into to face, uh, just know that it's coming from a CA, and the CA validates who you are, but then the issues may come when it comes to expiring. So we talked about PKI infrastructure. That's where we have our own public key, and we're putting it out there in a structured manner to share with others who want to come and visit our sites. We talked about certificates and the importance of having them on our sites to validate who we are, and then to say to our customers, our clients, hey, you can do business with us securely. So just keep those things in mind, and let's move on with the next lesson. Okay, so let's get into implementing authentication controls. When we start talking about authentication controls, we're going to start talking about identity and access management, and that's where we're creating users and we're creating objects within our directory to interact with each other. So we'll have things that we create in Active Directory or whatever account management system that you may have. And these things are known as subjects, objects, and they have different classifications when it comes to what they can interact with and then what who can interact with them. And we'll go into it deeper when it comes to permissions on if you get to talk to certain objects or subjects within that network. So authentication factors, whenever we're setting up a new user, it's nice to have these type of security factors or controls going on with just not just saying, hey, I have a username, let me into the system. You need to have other authentication factors to prove that you are who you say you are. So the one way we go about that is having something that you know. This could be something that you actually physically have knowledge of, or password, a PIN number that you may know. On certain phones, you've seen swiping pattern. I think it was older Androids that will allow you to connect the dots to have a swiping pattern. You can also have kind of like a challenge question passwords reset. So when you forget your password and you hit the I forgot password link, it will challenge you with three different word sentences or questions that you set up that only you should know the answers to. But from a hacker standpoint, if I've done my social engineering fairly well, I could probably answer those questions about you as well because I have done my research. But anyway, um, it could also be something that you have, right? Something that you have physically where it could be like tokens, fobs, where you keep on you whenever you log into a system, it would ask you to reference that token, that fob, in order to gain access. You also have something that you do or something that you are. So that will be a good example will be any kind of fingerprint, eye scans, things of that nature. So when creating a authentication design, we want to make sure that we hit those three pillars of our CIA triad. So remember, CIA triad is confidentiality, integrity, and then availability. And we want to make sure that confidentiality is keeping the credentials secure, and then integrity means that there shouldn't be any questions when it comes to if changes was made. And then availability is just exactly what it says. Do we have can the user be able to access at any time or any given time that they're were directed to get into their credentials, or should they have they shouldn't have any kind of support issues if they need to change any type of credentials? So a lot of times you'll see businesses move to a multi-factor authentication process where not only do you have a username and password, they also want you to have a fob or some type of authentication software that allows you to match that with your username and password. You'll have let's say Microsoft Authenticator, and that will be matched up right after you put in your password. And the concept is this, is that if I'm a bad guy and I have got your username and password, that's fine. Well, it's not good, but it's fine, so to say, if I can't get to your cell phone and get that multi authentication piece that's also linked with that username and password. So now you kind of leave me with no options of how to get into your account from the get-go. So it's good to have multi factor authentication whenever possible, but also sometimes we need to sit back and think about the business needs. Is it plausible to have it for everything that we need to log in for? But it's not just always a having a token that could be a multi-factor. It could also be somewhere you are, some type of geolocation. Are you on the company's network? Are you on a particular VPN? That can also lead to a multi-factor. Something that you can do. What kind of unique pattern can you perform that's only up to you? Something that you can perform or exhibit Also kind of going into that same performing a unique pattern, and then also someone you may know. So this may be going into the web of trust type of thing, where if I'm associated with this individual or computer, then I'm in a trusted network. There's various attacks that's going on passwords, and we got to understand why passwords are so valuable when it comes to attacking, right? So the reason why we want to get the passwords protected, or why a hacker will want a password, is because it makes it more easier to actually accomplish the goal that they're trying to accomplish, and that's getting into your account, seeing what type of permissions you have to actually get to the data that they want to get to. So a lot of times we can have certain non-security factors going against our passwords that make it easy for them to be cracked, or actually just bypassing altogether. So we have having passwords in plain text or unencrypted, just kind of leaving it out there in the database, so for whoever to see it. We also have like shared passwords that we all kind of use this one machine to print checks, and instead of giving everyone an account, we have one shared password with a username that we all just kind of use. The most famous way of going in and breaking someone's password is just a brute force attack, using something like John the Ripper, to actually go in and brute force a actual password, trying every possible way to figure out what is your password. So that's why, as a security professional, we harp on having a type of criteria when it comes to long passwords, having special characters in there, because whether you know it or not, the longer a password is, or the more complex a password is, the more longer it takes for a brute force to actually happen on that password. So I thought that was a good segue into brute force and dictionary attacks. Brute force, like I said, we're taking every possible character that we have in our language, and we actually are putting it against your password hash. So a lot of times, these attackers, they'll take the whole English dictionary and then apply it against your password. And we have computers fast enough to actually do it in a reasonable time, but that's why it's so important to put those special characters in uppercase and lowercase, and making it case sensitive, to where you know you just can't run through it within a day's time and actually come up with the password, or it at least will give enough time to show on the network that, hey, someone's actively moving traffic or causing a disruption in the traffic, to where now your security professionals can hone in and get the intruder off the network. So that's why we want robust passwords for our users. So with password crackers, what I want you guys to remember about password crackers is that it's a software that's going to perform more likely a brute force attack against your server that's housing the passwords on it. So 9 times out of 10, your exam is going to ask you, how does it do this? And that's going to be more likely a dictionary attack or a rainbow attack, where a dictionary attack is actually going through each word in the dictionary, and then trying each character, and then it changes it at a time. So remember, a brute force is just kind of trying each and every subject, character, symbol, one at a time, to see exactly what works. This is a surefire way of making sure that you will get in, right? If given enough time, a brute force attack will eventually work. But that's the beauty of having such a complex a password, is that given the time that the software needs to actually try each and every character, um, your password, to where it's is the length capacity creates more time for that software to actually perform the brute force attack. So therefore, it could be thousands of years before, literally thousands of years, if not millions of years, for a particular password to be cracked in order to try each and every character. So just keep those things in mind when it comes to password crackers. They eventually will get to it, but eventually may come in 10 million years. All right. So just keep those things in mind when it comes to password crackers. So authentication management, making sure that we understand where our passwords live, making sure that we have proper access to those passwords that's kind of stored somewhere. A lot of times, if you log into a certain applications on your phone, it may automatically fill in that password box for you. So just making sure that you understand what caches your password, making sure that you have the proper, if you're leaving your passwords into a password vault, so to say, then we have the proper permissions to go into that vault. Do we have two-factor authentication in order to enter that vault in order to see the other passwords that we have stored? So just keep those things in mind. In some industries, you may have a smart card, and this smart card is kind of like your profile, your account profile, loaded in on this mobile card, right? Something that you could take with you wherever you go, and it loads up on that computer or wherever you may go to show your profile and the permissions you have on it. So I know in the military, this is your cat card, as they call it, and it had everything that it needed to show kind of like this basic profile of yourself. And it was protected by having a four digit pin. I'm pretty sure now, maybe concepts have changed to where maybe that pin needs to be more of a 8 digit, maybe 6 digit pin now, but it's normally locked down with that pin. Now, you would always keep your smart card on you because we would treat it kind of like a license or some type of debit or credit card. So it could act as a second multi authenticator for that user because we're planning to have it all the time. So we also got this thing where we can put our usernames and passwords on kind of like an external device and use those things to log in to apply those credentials. And we will say, hey, instead of you actually logging in every day, use this smart card and that will have your credentials on it. And only thing you need to remember is a four-digit, six-digit pin, maybe 9 digits, and just type that in, and then you won't have to worry about changing your password or whatever the case may be. Because if you have this lets us know that you have access to our network. And a lot of times we see this in smart cards or USB tokens. Excuse me. So with smart cards, again, it's that the chip that's on that smart card houses all of the credential information that you need in order to navigate on your company's network. The problem with that is that we as humans tend to lose things from time to time. So if we're on a trip, a business trip to Las Vegas, and we tend to lose things, and we lose our a smart card. Now we have just created a denial of service attack on ourselves by losing the card, but also maybe giving potential access to someone else who finds the card, and then maybe if they can slide it into the, let's say, the a laptop to actually get permissions to whatever network that's out there. So we just want to keep those things in mind when it's best practice to actually have a two-factor authentication when it comes to giving out external devices like this or a USB token, because you want your users to remember their username and password, but also to justify even more who they are, especially in a remote world. We want them to have that extra authentication piece to say, hey, yes, I do know the username and password, but I also know that I need to pair it with this token. And so this token was also given to me by the company, and then I have those two things, and hopefully they haven't fell in the wrong hands. So this one more factor of putting kind of a defense in depth in order to build this force field up. So not only are we just relying on username and passwords, but we could rely on a smart card with a PIN number, or a smart card that only works with certain laptops, or just having a USB token going along with your username and password. Therefore, your users need to know both in order to get onto the network. I also touched on the token keys a lot, just kind of giving like that one-time passcode that you need to authenticate yourself onto that network. So these tokens could be either hardware tokens, something that you can see clipped onto a key ring, so you can always keep it on you, right? Or you can now have it as a downloaded app on your phone, or smart device. So it could be a pad or a tablet. So you can have these soft tokens on your phone and log in it with a pin, of course, and then it gives you a code that you can actually finish authenticating with. So to give a good example of that is that when you log in to whatever access site that you're trying to get into, you'll put your username in, you'll put that password in, but then it would actually go to a different window to show, hey, put in the token for that matches this hardware token, right? And it's basically talking back to a server that has the same type of numbers going back and forth, and you'll see kind of a countdown, and you have maybe 60 seconds to put in the code, and in order to have that code put in, then now you're synchronizing with that authenticating management server in order to give you access to your account. But don't get that confused with don't get the soft token confused with open authentication. So the OAuth is more a kind of a second factor to it, where we put in our username and password, but it sends a confirmation uh, to us, and it's good for maybe, let's say, a day, or maybe 15 minutes, whatever time frame that the administrator wants us to have. But it's sending us a confirmation to say, hey, did you receive this? And if you did, then respond back to the window that we automatically sent you to, and then we will let you into your account. So this is not necessarily the same as a second a software token, where that's actually talking back to the management server at real time. This is more of a confirmation coming back to say, hey, you tried to access this account. Well, if that's the case, then go back and look into your email, look into your phone. We have sent a text, we have sent an email. Please respond back with the code that's within. So just to kind of reiterate, when it comes to open authentication, it will have kind of like a two-part factor, right? So we're gonna log in with our username and password, but then it's going to ask you to verify yourself via phone or email. And a lot of times, this is a good factor to say, hey, not only do you need to know your username and password, you probably need to know your username and password to your email in order to get that email and then verify with whatever website that you're trying to get into. The same thing goes for your phone, right? So it's good to have when it comes to validating the security efforts. Now, the problem with that is that it can be intercepted, as far as, let's say, if you don't have your phone at the time, or let's just say you left your email open, constantly logged in on another tab. So those could be factors of, hey, maybe if I play around, yeah, it's asking me to do a two-factor, but maybe, just maybe, they left their email open on the other tab. So let me go check that. Now, when talking biometrics, biometrics authentication, I think is a very good technology to have to, it's everybody's fingerprint is unique to them. So you don't have to worry about ever being reduplicated. But at the same time, it comes down to the technology. If the technology can read your fingerprint or read the patterns of your eye, the retina of your eye, in order to determine if it's you. So a lot of times the technology, in order to um, grant you access or not, it comes under a fail rate or an acceptance rate. And a lot of times you don't want to make the acceptance rate so easy to where anybody can look at the, let's say, your phone, and then they're able to get in via the face recognition. But yet you don't want to make it so tough to where um, if you look at it with just shades on, then it's not letting you in. So you have to find that balance of an acceptance rate as well as a reject rate. I'm aware that face recognition and eye scanning is controversial to users, and you may get a lot of users that don't want to participate in that type of technology. And this is where, if you still want to implement a type of biometrics, you're probably going to go with a fingerprint scanner. But while it's easy to implement within your organization, it is vulnerable to spoof someone's fingerprint. So just be aware of those type of things. But overall, you'll get more users to be able to buy in versus more secure ways of doing it, such as a facial recognition. Now, going into that facial recognition, as you can see, just looking at the slide here, it could be kind of intimidating to people. And they kind of, I think movies probably didn't help easing the enrollment of facial recognition within the world. So, but it's a good way of having a security technology for authentication. This is where you can scan the iris of your eye, um, or the blood patterns in your retina of the eye to see what's unique to you. And again, it's a little intrusive, but a lot more secure than your average fingerprint scanner. We touched on behavioral technologies just a tad bit with the things that you are. But you can also go into something that you do, voice recognition, the way you say, whether it's Siri or Google, however you call their names, it's on a voice recognition type of technology. Signature recognition, actual handwriting, or maybe a typing speed. How long does it? Are you a type of typer that you hit the backspace a lot, or do you hit the space bar within so many seconds of words? So these are things that you do uniquely to your personality. So the key points to remember is that we have multiple ways of getting onto the network. It's not necessarily a traditional way of just using a username and password. We have smart cards. We have different devices that can take other factors into account in order to verify whoever needs access to our network. Could be biometrics. So just keep those things in mind. Keeping know the disadvantages and the advantages of having each device in your network, and just know how they're implemented across the network to give your users a better, proficient way of getting onto the network. So lesson 8, we're going to talk about identity and account management controls. What things are we putting in place in order to administer the type of usernames, identities that we're giving our objects, and then how do we actually manage the accounts once they're set up and running. So when we're jumping in that identity access management, there's a bunch of controls we can put in place in order to help us uh, be more secure when we're giving access to people, and also just kind of validating their authorization. So we can use certain things like certificates and smart cards. A lot of certificates you'll see used is when it comes to public key cryptography. We can also use tokens, and tokens will give us this type of validation that this person is who we say they are, because we may have given them a username and password, but we also gave them a token to, we assigned them a token to actually validate the username and password. So we can use those things. We can also use identity providers such as Federated Identity Management, where if I log into one web page, then automatically another web page may accept me because of our by me knowing a mutual party. So a lot of times what you want to think about is when you can go to a certain website and they say, hey, if you have a Google account, then log in with your Google account. You won't have to set one up. We'll automatically trust the fact that you have a Google account in order to create this account with us. And from here on out, whenever you create that account, you can use your Google account or Gmail account to actually log into that website. So when bringing on new individuals, you need to make sure that you have an onboarding process as well as an offboarding process. Onboarding meaning we have a checklist, or we make sure that we have everything in process, that once you come through our doors, we know exactly what information to give you and what not to give you. More importantly, we know how to create your account. We know how to give you permissions to where you can print to certain printers, be able to share files within your first day, and you're not sharing out of your scope of the things that you need to do in your work day. So we want to make sure that HR has the proper person policies, making sure IT has their proper policies as well, and that everyone that we bring on, that is it's a almost a cookie cutter type deal to where everyone has the same process. Also, we want to make sure that we do the opposite whenever we let someone go, someone gets fired or quits, or God forbid passes on. We want to make sure that we have a offboarding process as well, making sure that we take away permissions, we take away cell phones, any kind of tablets that they may have, laptops, tokens, anything that we have given them. We need to make sure we get that stuff back. And we also want to make sure that there's a policy for that, as well as a checklist for that, making sure that, hey, once John is terminated from this job, the proper personnel is aware, not only just the security to make sure that they are escorted off the premises, but to make sure that the proper personnel is in IT knows that this person is gone, so we can disable his account or her account. Um, we also want to make sure that in the onboarding process, or in the interview process, that we might want them to sign an NDA. Maybe the job that we're bringing them on for, we need to tell them trade secrets or important information that makes us unique in our field. And so in order to give them that information, maybe we want them to sign a non-disclosure agreement saying that you won't talk to anybody else if you're not selected for this job. So just making sure that we have all these things in plan to take a new personnel, as well as to offload someone. So now that we got our personnel into the office, we need to make sure that we have policies in place for them to follow on a day-to-day basis. We may need to make sure that we have separation of duties in place, making sure that they're not just have to do everything, that we have managers in place in order for them to do certain tasks that should be taken away from them. So to give a good example on that is that if a bank teller has the permissions to print a check, then they should not have the permissions to cash the same check. They should have to go to their manager or floor manager or whoever in order to cash that check. That should be a separation of the duty. Now, we have least privilege, and we want to make sure that we give them only the enough permissions for them to do their job on a day-to-day task. We don't want to over load them with permissions in order to see every file that's here on the directory. We want to make sure that we only give them enough permissions in order to see what they need to see. And this is needed because if they're compromised with their account and a hacker gets into their account, then we don't have to worry about them seeing more than what they're actually able to see. They can see only what Bob can see in the mailroom, and he doesn't have access to the marketing department. So make sure that we have least privilege in entailed on our accounts. We also want to make sure that we have job rotation. So kind of going with the separation of duties, job rotation is not having you do the same job year in and year out, or even if we want to rotate the functions that you may do quarterly throughout that year, right? So in order to do that, we're just going to make sure that our training process is up to par, because a lot of us, the reason why we probably stay in one spot is because we can't actually train you in another spot, right? But if we can rotate you out, then we can have you doing something totally different every quarter. Therefore, if you were, let's say, you were sneaking money out from one account to your account every month, you were just sneaking that money out, and then we rotate the jobs. Now you're not able to have access to those accounts, and we get Susie to come in and do your job. Then we can see, oh, okay, wait, we had logs of this money going to Bob's account every month, but now all of a sudden it stopped. So that's why we kind of want to have that job rotation to kind of weed out those processes that we don't have an awareness of. So we want to make sure that we have that job rotation. We also want to make sure that we have a mandatory vacation too, just to kind of, piggyback on that job rotation. Let's say if we can't rotate jobs, we can have mandatory vacations where we tell you to go home for 2 weeks and see if anything arises, any kind of different processes comes up, and now all of a sudden we found out that this was going on while you were over it. So now we can ask those questions and get those things ironed out, or we could take the appropriate actions. So, like I said, HR needs to have those onboarding processes, but we also, like I said, to have those offboarding processes, making sure that we get everything back. We want to get our laptops back, phones. We give out phones, but make sure we take them back. Make sure we change the phone number. And we just don't give the same phone number back to the new guy or the new girl that's coming onto the job, right? Making sure that we take back tokens, bank credit cards. I'm sorry, not bank credit cards, but business credit cards, just in case you had someone that was traveling, and sometimes you forget to get those type of items back, USBs, USB thumb drives. And these are things that we accumulate over our time, our tenure at our business, and we just accumulate all this business assets, and we just don't. We sometimes a breakup, or let's say if I'm really mad and I quit the job, then do I have a policy in place to say, hey, Lee's not gonna come up to the business to give back the stuff. Can we remote wipe the cell phone that he kept? Can we remote wipe the laptop that he kept? What information was on that laptop? Can we shut it down in any other way? Because I may not get that back. Let's say if you have an employee suddenly pass on, then how do you go about respecting the family but also protecting the business at the same time? What is the process on that? So we want to make sure that we have all those policies ironed out, and making sure that we have just as a robust onboarding processes, that we have a offboarding process that just as robust to keep the business safe, keep it moving forward, but at the same time, getting back what assets you may have given out to that employee. So when creating accounts, we want to make sure that we have privileges limited to what a user can do at their job and nothing more, right? But we also want to make sure that we put in different policies like password policies, and we also want to make sure that they don't have permissions to change any kind of system configurations. To give an example is that once I give Bob the credentials to log into a computer at work, do I really want him to add his own printer or his own device uh, at on his login account? So we want to make sure that we don't give them any kind of system configuration rights, and have, unless it's part of their job to do so. So if we have Susan who's just got added on to the IT team, then she needs to have a privilege account in order to allow those type of changes to happen. Whenever we have guest accounts for our third party vendors that come in, we need to make sure that they have an anonymous log on, something that we're going to throw away as soon as they're done with whatever business that they're bringing on to the company. So we want to make sure that we really limited their accounts to only the things that they need, and that's pretty much just internet access, but we want to make sure that we lock down those type of accounts. So we touched on group-based policies just a tad bit whenever I was talking about we create a group. Let's say we create a group for marketing, the marketing team, and we want to make sure that they can go to their marketing printer. They can talk to each other all within the department just fine. They can share files with each other. They can look at the files that each other has made, and we want to make sure that policies for that group accounts for everyone that's in that group. So if we can create a group in Active Directory with a certain amount of policies for a particular group, and we know how their business and their operations work, we can limit their permissions only to their job needs. And so whenever we have someone come on to the organization or leave the organization, only thing we have to do is really just take them out of the group, and or put them into a group in order to have those permissions or to take those permissions away. Now let's talk about admin accounts, super user accounts, root accounts. These are accounts that are pretty much can make any changes to the network. But as a security professional, you don't want to give someone super user account, or in the industry, sometimes we'll say a God account, to where there are the only ones that can make the changes. Now, I get it if the corporation or the company is very small and it's a handful of administrators, it may be an account that has a super user does all account. But we want to make sure that we're very careful with these type of accounts, because these are what the intruders, the attackers, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for these type of accounts that can do all and go wherever they want to go on the network and manipulate anything that they want, because it has the permission to do so. So instead of me as a hacker trying to create my own account, why not just get an account that already has those permissions already applied to them? So we want to make sure that if we do have administrators on our network, that we give them permissions to make changes. But what changes can they make? Can they change passwords? And if they can change passwords, can they change group policies? And if they can change group policies, maybe they can't allow websites or disable antivirus software. So we want to make sure that we give them permission, but not all the permissions. And we want to make sure that we understand how the business works, how accounts work, and that way we can delegate the permissions accordingly. Now, going along with those admin accounts, sometimes you will run across these service accounts, and a service account is kind of like this generic admin account that you may get with a product that you just bought or you just got out of the store. So, let's say if you just bought a router or an extender for your network, it may come with a service account, a generic admin account that has the permissions of a administrator. The thing to be aware about those type of accounts is that a lot of us do not understand where they're at. So the router in your house may have a service account actually stamped onto that physical router. So, whenever you can, just pause this video and go and look at your router and see if there's a service account linked to it. It may have a username of admin and the password of an admin. And if you would to plug in the uh, the web page for your device, you could use that credentials to get in and make the changes on your router. So we need to be aware that these service accounts are out there, and we need to make sure that we are able to get into those, change passwords, change the credentials, and maybe take some of the permissions away on those type of accounts, or make sure that we just at the least, change the password on them. So this slide pretty much reiterates what I said in the previous slide with the generic accounts. And they're kind of like generic admin accounts, but we also have shared accounts that, let's say, in certain examples, would be kind of like we're working in a bank and we need to print checks. Maybe we have a standalone machine that's off in the corner somewhere, and we're just using that as tellers to print checks. Well, instead of giving people permission for that, since it's a standalone machine, we may have a one login machine, login credentials for that machine. And then now it's shared among the 10 or 11, 12 people that's in that particular branch for that bank. And so we need to make sure that those credentials that's on those standalone machines that are shared accounts, we want to make sure that our users are very aware about the security of those accounts, and then making sure that we go in as administrators on that account. And then, like I said, kind of trimming it down, trimming the permissions down to where it can only do but so much damage. Now, when you're building out your accounts, you can get real granular on how much information you want to put in there. But from a security standpoint, how much information do you really want to put into your attributes when it comes to building your accounts? So, we want to make sure that we have a naming scheme, some type of account name, username. Is it going to be first and last name? Is it going to be first initial, last name? Is it going to be something totally different, where it's just like a randomized letter and number scheme that can be assigned to your users? Just keep these things in mind. It's good to have is user friendly whenever your username is first and last or first initial last name, but when it comes to, let's say, reconnaissance on the hacker side, if I'm doing any kind of reconnaissance on, let's say, LinkedIn, then if I have a name in place and a company to link it to, then I can easily figure out the first part, which is your username. And then now the hard part would be the password. But if I had a random jumble of letters and numbers, then now you're making it much harder for the hacker to figure out usernames at least. Now, yes, it is kind of harder on your clients to remember something new, but you do run the risk of some clients or some users writing down their username and password. But I would rather go with having that than you're never going to change your name. You're never going to, the likelihood of you changing your name is low. So I would rather go that route versus of having something random for your username versus usernames being your name or initials. So we talked about the account password policies a little bit, and this is We want to make sure that we have a strong policy in place and we have a rotating policy. And what I mean by rotating policy is meaning that our users change their passwords on a 3-month basis. From what I've seen is pretty much standard. We want to make sure that we have a length character of somewhere between 8 to 14 characters. We want to make sure that it is complex, where we are using a combination of alphabets, numbers, special characters, things of that nature. Remember, whenever we make the character or the password longer, that is harder to brute force. So that's why, if you ever wonder why uh, it needs to have all of these contexts into a password, it's because the brute forcing technique takes a lot longer to actually put in, and different characters and different type of symbols when it comes to our passwords. So again, we also want to make sure that we change it every 3 months, or the more you change it, the better. But we also want to make sure that we don't have a reuse on our passwords. I've seen some places where they allow 10 password changes and then they allow you to reuse after the 10th password change. But some places I've also been where you get no reuses. And really, it shouldn't be any excuse for reuses. You should be able to take small phrases and encrypt it, not encrypted, that's the wrong word, but cipher different letters and symbols into a small phrase in order to create your new password. I'll show you a video on how I come up with passwords and how you should teach your users how to do the same thing. Also, lastly, we can have password hints or some type of forget password link for our users that's having trouble with their passwords, and we can have security questions set up in order for them to go the next step in order to reset their passwords. So, like I said earlier, I wanted to show you how I make my passwords and how I go about whenever I'm forced to change my passwords, or not really don't want to say forced, but it's good practice to change your passwords. I take a short statement like this: I love cookies, and then I'm going to go about putting my uppercase and lowercase in there, as well as just throwing some numbers in there along with my favorite dollar sign. So I replace my circles, I replace my O's with zeros, as well as threes are probably going to represent the E's. If I have any A's in there, that's going to be represented by 4. And then I use a symbol. I use let's say a star or underscore. I might use a dollar sign. So I use all of these things just to kind of really start with my phrase, but just change letters out in order to make it more complex. But I'm still following that same phrase, right? So whenever I'm typing in my password, I know that it's I love cookies, but I have it embedded in my brain that I'm replacing some vowels with the numbers. Now, along with those account attributes, you can have account restrictions, such as like a geo mapping or some type of network location to where you're having access to your network or not. So the first thing that pops up in my mind is kind of like a VPN. If someone is able to log in with their VPN, then they can have access. So that account is linked to the network, the internal network of the company. And we, in order for us as external users on an external network, we need to get to the internal via VPN. And it can be linked in that way when it comes to your account. You can also have a time-based restrictions on your account. So if we want our users to maybe work from 8 to 5 o'clock and maybe give a grace period at 6 o'clock, then we want everything, we could put that restriction in for 7 o'clock until 7 o'clock the next morning, to where we don't allow users to VPN in, or we don't allow users to come into the building or if you happen to get into the building, you can't log in at that point in time. So these things allow for better security, as far as if there's no reason for us to be working at 2 o'clock in the morning, then we can put the restrictions in. So if we do see any activity at 2 o'clock in the morning, it raises a red flag. We can take the appropriate actions. Now, from time to time, we want to make sure that we have account audits. Auditing is just checking behind the processes in place, the configurations that are in place. In this case, the accounts that have been put into place in the groups. What type of permissions did we put out there? Do we have the right permissions for the marketing team? Do we have the right permissions for our financial team? Do we need to take things away? What have we learned? And then are we doing it right? This is pretty much how a audit should work. And then it helps us to perform better, because we can always go back and say, hey, you know what? This is not allowing us to be more secure, and it's not allowing the business to move forward. So we can always have these audits to help us out, cleaning up what we already have in place. So let's talk about account lockouts and disablement of accounts. So we want to make sure that we have this type of a policy implemented into our organization for several reasons. You want to lock out, of course, someone when they get their account or password wrong, maybe after 5 times. A thing that you may or may not know is that after 30 minutes time waited after your fifth chance and a lockout, then your account is automatically unlocked. There is a configuration in there to where it stays locked, and then the only one that can unlock you is the IT team or whoever is the administrator over the Active Directory. But we want to make sure that we are locking accounts out, and that we are disabling accounts that are not needed with the company anymore. We want to make sure that if Bob leaves the network, or I'm sorry, Bob leaves the company, then we disable his account, not necessarily delete his account, but disable his account in order for him to not use that same username and password, in order to, maybe go to an external login or network, and then get back into the business side of the network, log in with his old account that we never disabled, and then be able to pull or transfer files or what have you. So we want to make sure that we disable. The reason why I said we don't need to delete is because maybe we need to keep some files that he had. Maybe we need to search his account. Maybe it's a necessary duty that we go through his account and make sure that he didn't do anything malicious. So we want to make sure that that account is disabled, but not necessarily deleted. So in further classes, we'll go over how long we should keep certain documentations. So this is another attribute to what you want to do when it comes to disabling an account. So when bringing on individuals, making users onto our network, we can either have them grouped into certain groups, and then they have permissions and rights that way, or we can have based off the resources that they're going to be working with, or the ownership is going to determine what type of rights that they have. So when it comes to ownership, resource ownership, then we're going to talk about discretionary access control. That's hey, you work for me, so I'm going to say that you need to have access to these documents, and that's discretionary. On my discretionary, I'm going to give you access or request access. And then you have role based. Role based is more likely what you're going to see into the real world. You're going to be able to be lumped into a group. If you're working in the marketing department, then you will be lumped into the marketing group and get the policies and the permissions that the marketing group will receive. And the same thing goes for finance, HR, different departments that you may have in a 9 to 5 type of organization. So just to kind of go into ACLs. ACL stands for Access Control List, and this is where we pretty much we give people permission based on their role or group or time in the organization. We give them permission on what they can and cannot do when it comes to their username and the resources we have on the network. So maybe you cannot print to the printer that's on floor 15, but yet you can go and see whatever documents that we have in for the contracting group. So when creating different users, we want to make sure that we have different standards for those type of users, and we want to make sure that we don't give them more permissions that they actually need to do their job. A lot of times we can go ahead and just give someone all the assets in the world. Yes, it creates less work for us to actually come back and maybe dumb down those permissions. It creates less work that way. But um, from a security standpoint, if you're giving them that much access to different things on your network, then you're opening yourself up to a bigger risk of being attacked. But when developing ACLs, we not only just have role-based access controls, we can also have mandatory access controls, which is abbreviated for MAC. A lot of times you'll see this in the government sector. I know a lot of time when I was in the military that we would use labels and clearances to actually show what type of access you have, whether it be private, confidential, um, um, class unclassified, secret, top secret. So you will see these type of things whenever you're um, studying for the exam. Just think whenever you're seeing labels or clearances, then you're probably talking about a mandatory access control. We also have attribute-based um, access control, which is a combination of the subject and the object. Where you're the actual subject and then the object you're trying to get to will be the printer on the 15th floor. So you can have those type of attributes determine what type of assets you have throughout the company. You can also have rule-based access controls, and this is where it's not determined by the users or the managers that's in the organization. It's determined by the system, and it's more of a stricter access, but a very secure access as well. So, and sometimes when authenticating to a certain site, you may have certain sites that trust each other on a federation level, and they say, "Hey, if you log into one, then we automatically trust you to coming in and accessing this account on our side." So a lot of times you'll see kind of like these inner workings together, and that's where you get OAuth and OpenID kind of connecting these accounts together on different sites. You see it when it comes to different websites as well as from a website down to a mobile app. So going back to our onboarding process, whenever we're bringing on new individuals to our network, we want to make sure that we put out different policies that they know the terms on which we allow certain behavior. A lot of times, everyone who's been hired on have probably signed an acceptable use policy, AUP, and that's pretty much laying out the guidelines of what are you allowed to do and what will not be tolerated at this organization. So we want to make sure that that policy strictly outlines everything that we are willing to allow on our network. You also want to make sure that in some cases you want to make sure that you have a rules of behavior when it comes to social media. Are you allowed to take pictures within the organization and then post them on social media? It's not necessarily how much you can post in your actual saying in a statement, but then if you're letting out um, secret information or confidential information in a post, then we need to have policies against that too. So just make sure that we outline these type of things are what kind of behavior we are willing to accept of our users. We also want to make sure that this is where we outline if they're going to bring in their own phone to use within the organization, or if we're going to give them a phone. you know, once they if they're going to bring into their own into the organization their own phone and then put corporate emails on their phone, then technically that information is outside of the care of the organization. So how would they need to monitor that? How would we need to have our users take care of that information that's on their personal phone? So all those things need to be outlined on a policy, and make sure that our users sign those policies upon entry. So what you want to do on I would say a monthly basis, but more of an annual basis, is we want to train our users. We want to make sure that our users understand what we want to have them do within the organization, right? So kind of reiterating that acceptable use policy, we want to make sure we train our users on the different types of security policies that we have, what to do, how to handle data that's leaked out, or maybe before you actually make a mistake and sending out confidential information, what to do when you're faced with that adversity. So we want to make sure that they know what to do, how to react, and then the appropriate things to use or appropriate things to say when it comes to divulging different type of data that's secret to the organization. Now, like I said, this training normally happens yearly, and we often have to sign off on it, saying to a governing body that we have taken the training. But a lot of times you can have those training broken up into different types of methods, right? So not only can we have them go into a certain website and do different scenarios and simulations with a computer-based training, but we also can have phishing campaigns that go out throughout the year, quarterly, or maybe twice a year, if you really want to just kind of test the waters when people are getting into their workflow, making sure that they're going in and doing the things that they need to do on a daily basis. We might want to just throw a phishing campaign out on a quarterly basis, and making sure that they understand what a phishing email looks like, because sometimes when you get into that flow of just working, looking at emails become redundant. So you want to make sure you test your users to see if they're on their toes, and see exactly how a good phishing email looks and how to react to it. So the key points to remember when it comes to identity access management is that this is a baseline of when users come onto our network. What do we give them permissions to do? What do we give them permissions to see? And how do we manage that as they go through their tenure here at the business? So just knowing that if you have a good grasp on your users, and when it comes to their accounts and how it's made, and then the properly disposing of them, put you in a great position to not have to worry about their accounts being compromised and then being taken advantage of by an unworthy individual. So lesson 9, let's talk about securing network designs. How are we gonna put things in place in order to make our network more secure, and keeping them out of sight of the bad guys. So the one thing that you're going to learn as a security professional is that we always have some type of best practice, and networks is no different. We actually want to follow what works in our industry, and seeing what others have done to make their network more secure is something that we could probably use in our environment, right, in whatever sector that we're in. But a lot of times we want to make sure that when we start designing our network, that we actually set things up in a secure manner. We have security in mind. So we want to make sure that we not only think about what type of encryption that we want to use on our networks, but we also want to know about the single points of failure. Is it easy for one router or asset point to go down, and then now no one can get on that network? Is it easy to break into the passwords, actually get access like that? Is it Is it accessible from outside the building? Can people from the parking lot actually get access to your network and then snoop around and make lateral movement? So all these things you want to make sure in the designing phase and throughout the changes that you make, right? So just because the network is set up and running, we also need to make sure is it as is it efficient enough to be secure enough, right? So do we need to make changes throughout its life cycle? And you want to make sure that we design the network in a secure manner, always having security in the forefront of the mind when designing our network. And so when you're designing stuff of your network for whatever, whether it be the house or your home office or whether it's a small business or enterprise, you want to know how data flows in and out of your network. So you want to know if we're in a small business and we're trying to set up a network for a dentist office, we want to make sure what devices do they have on the network, and then what are we doing to send out different data? Are we just checking email? Are we downloading files from a cloud provider? What are we doing on a daily day basis? And that's knowing your workflow, knowing your business architecture, where we know exactly what the business is doing to make money. And then now, how do we formulate a plan around the network in order to make making money more secure, right? So that's how we want to look at things, and we want to just know every detail about how business is conducted in this whatever venture we're in, and then we want to make those things secure. So if you're not familiar with the OSI model, I want you guys to take it upon yourself to actually Google the OSI model and look at the different layers about how data is transferred from one device to the next. But this picture right here is pretty much showing how data comes into your network. So at the physical layer, that where the telephone cable that may goes into your, not a telephone cable, but the RJ45 that goes into your laptop, that Ethernet cable, that goes in, and then it actually communicates with the NIC card that's in there to the network closet that you may be connected to, or the Wi-Fi signal, and you're connected to that access point. And as you see right here on the first layer, you'll see that switch and that access point. That's where the data is coming in. So if I send you an email, it's going to show up at that access point and then wait for some type of communications to your device in order to, actually bring it up to the application layer, which is layer 7, in order for you to actually see what's going on. So this diagram here just kind of shows a quick overview of how these layers look. Now, mind you, it's 7 in all, but you just see your main ones here when it comes to networking and how data comes into the network, and this is how it flows out. So it starts at that application layer, and then it goes down. It breaks down into layer 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Once it gets back to layer 1, and it turns into bits, ones and zeros, and that's how it goes across the network to its destination. Its destination being a router in Atlanta, or just someone that's on the fifth floor while you're on the third. So that's how data is actually ported from station to station. And we also want to look at this kind of this diagram by showing where we want our firewalls to be put at. Sometimes we may want to put our proxy servers in different spots in order to take our data, analyze our data, or maybe even redirect our data when it comes in, kind of like redirecting the traffic or making a detour if we needed to. So this is a good example of that. And like I said, if you're not familiar with the OSI model, please take your time, Google it real quick, and read up on it and watch some videos on it. Network segmentation is one of the best ways we can make our networks more complex, not putting everything on one network, being able to segment the network off into different VLANs and have different devices talk to or be on the same IP wavelength as other devices that they're actually doing the same thing. I think it shows a complexity that you've put thought and effort into your network, but it also it's a hindrance to a individual trying to hack onto your network and then trying to see what's actual valuable on your network. So if we want to separate our marketing department away from our financial department, it serves a lot of a more of a purpose than just lumping everybody in onto one network. Now, this slide talks about network topologies and zones. So when you're into the networking field, you're going to probably be looking at everything from a high level, but also you're able to get into the weeds of your network. So whenever you're looking at a topology, you're probably looking at images on a PowerPoint or some type of diagram, and it looks similar to what you see here on the screen. And so in order to have it logically in your mind of how the building is set up network wise, this is where you get topologies at. And then now if we have everybody that's on the second floor who's within the financing department, then we could say that they're all on the same network, or in this case, let's say they're all on the VLAN 100, or and then everybody who's in legal is on VLAN 110. And so we can break them up in uh, a logical format that we can understand it a little bit easier. It's easier on the eyes instead of just looking at a bunch of IP addresses and then trying to understand the nomenclature about how our network is actually situated. So again, you'll see different groups broken up on a piece of paper wise, but it's not necessarily that like that when you get into the building. You have people who may be on a mobile, uh, be a mobile device to where they move from floor to floor. Maybe they don't even work in that building. But we have them on a particular VLAN in order to receive updates or to receive any type of permissions that we want them to have,